Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon, everybody. How you doing? Welcome to Monday. We got a new day, new week, and here we are. I'm excited about this week because I did another theme for the week. Just like we did a couple weeks ago, we had a theme about truth. This week, the theme is about vaccine impact. So, and I don't mean necessarily on people. Okay, that's going to be next week with Dr. Peter McCullough, stuff like that. This week is about professions. So, how did mandates, whether they're the mask or the vaccines, impact the profession? And today we're going to be doing lawyer. Tomorrow is going to be healthcare. Thursday is going to be airlines and pilots. And Friday is going to be truckers or logistics. So, yeah, we got Chris Barber on Friday. Greg Hill on Thursday. We got Shoemaker coming tomorrow, Dr. Shoemaker, and possibly a nurse coming tomorrow who was part of the lawsuit in Ontario for the nurses. She just had a baby, and we're trying to deal with whether or not we can get the schedule to fit. But we do have Dr. Shoemaker coming. And then today we got Daniel Ari Freiheit, who is better known as the better-looking Freiheit of the David and Daniel collection, also known as Viva Frei. He's a very, very, very fun gentleman. I've been following his stuff for a little bit. And what I'm really, really attracted to on Daniel is his position on maids. You know how I feel about maids. Can't believe we even have it. That's what I feel about that. So I'll be talking to him about that one because that one's dear to my heart. And I was very pleased that this is something he works on and talks about. So how's your weekend, everybody? You know what mine was like. It was hectic, hectic, hectic. And doing my best trying to get these shows going while I'm traveling. Whew. It was a testament to scheduling and to support from my wife. So thank you very much, Padge. I know you're listening. You're the best. You're the best. You make this stuff happen. You keep me fed. You keep me full of coffee, like you said this morning. You're going to keep me full of water. I appreciate that. So thank you, everybody. Yeah, it's going to be a good week. Really looking forward to getting down into the nitty gritty about how the vaccine mandates and mask mandates impacted the professions. You know, I'm a paralegal from Ontario, but I left. I left just as this whole thing started and came out to Alberta. So I'm very, very passionate about the legal system and really, really concerned that if there's any impacts coming to it because of mandates of any kinds. For example, people who at one time, not now anymore, I believe, but at one time, jurors had to be vaccinated. That's a scary thought because those are compliant people with government. So, oof, that was a concern. And also to my little YouTube watchers, we won't be going into anything that requires YouTube to get upset. What we're going to be talking about is the impact of mandates and stuff like that on the profession. We're not denying anything and we're not breaking down anything. All right. So this should be YouTube safe, but we'll find out the hard way. And then next week, I'm working on a whole bunch of fighters. I'm not sure if there's a theme on that one yet because I'm still fleshing out who's coming, but there's a lot of interesting people coming. And then I'm going to tell you a little bit later about the week after that. It's getting really exciting. Tomorrow might be on that one. But in either case, we're all ready for vaccine mandates and the profession and how it impacted it. And we'll start off with Daniel Freiheit for the legal profession. Good afternoon, Daniel. How are you doing?
Hey, Jason.
Hey, how you doing?
Great. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm getting back into the rhythm. I basically took last week and I was on the road trying to cover the court case in Coots. Well, not in Coots, about the Coots. It was in Lethbridge. But yeah, I'm back. I'm back into my trailer. I feel like I'm getting back into the groove again. And thank you very much for.
I like the trailer. Have you done a tour of it when you're in some of your shows before?
Not yet, but I can give you a quick one if you like.
Sure.
This is like my family corner here. So this is a doll that my wife got that looks like me. There's a painting behind for my son. There's a picture of my son. So I keep my family near. The Coots men, I picked this up on the way. The Coots guys as well, innocent until proven guilty. Over here, I have my marquee. I thought it'd be fancy. I found that at Walmart. Nice. I have my diploma, my paralegal diploma. Justice has been turned upside down for now. So wow. I put that there. Yeah. And then on the top, I just have some books. I got my airplane. I used to have an airplane right there.
Oh, you had an airplane? Pilot. Wow. Good for you. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. I just did some silly things after midlife crisis, I guess. I became a paralegal and I became a pilot and a project manager professional all in like 3 years. Wow. When I got a bunch of things done. And this is my bears and my son and then just some knickknacks. But that's my And
Cool.
right now, the Canadian flag is the correct way up, but it might get flipped upside down soon because I'm starting to get a lot of interviews with people who are getting me to understand a little bit more how things are working. And some of it's good. We can work with it and fix things. And some of it is scary. Don't know how we got that way. But anyways, Daniel, thanks. There's my tour. I'm going to clip that and put it out there.
Very good. Very good.
Then I can take a look at your background. So you've got
tiles, lights, and my computer and earphones.
Are you in your office?
I am.
And where are you located?
So I have a few locations. This right now I'm located at Dundas and 427.
Okay.
So I practice. So Lion Advocacy is my
Etobicoke.
Etobicoke. Very good.
Yeah.
You know the hood.
I used to live in the GTA.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a Canadian mutt. I've been all over this country. I know quite a bit. But yeah, Etobicoke. So the 427 coming down to the Gardner downtown. I would drive that a lot from Brampton.
That's right. Yeah. And so, my advocacy stuff is really, it came to light because of what I was kind of getting caught in the crossfires of during my regular solicitor work. Right. And so I realized I had to take a different kind of tactic in communicating what I was seeing and what the issues were. So
that advocacy work came during the mandate stuff, or was
it started primarily during around February 2022. When basically I thought everything was going to end, and it just got worse and worse. And so I reached out to Law Times. Law Times interviewed me a couple of times for a couple articles, and then that wasn't enough because people were still not changing. And so I had to basically create my own media platform of sorts just to get the message out that what I'm seeing is not normal, and that there's we got a problem. Houston, we have a problem.
Ottawa, we have a problem.
15 months and we still have problems. We still got the problems, and I cannot for the life of me. I don't get it. So here we are.
Well, we're going to jump into that. We're going to jump into whether or not you're being red pilled or black pilled when it comes to advocacy and stuff like that as well. So we'll jump into that in a bit.
Okay.
But let's rewind a bit. So we know you have one brother. We've seen him before. Any other siblings?
I do. There's 5 of us in total. 4 boys, 1 girl.
Cool.
So
all with the letter D names?
All of us are lawyers, or all of us went into law school, and then 4 of us got law degrees, and then 1 of us didn't.
Went into another thing. Was your family, like your parents, were they into law?
Yeah, my dad was into law, and so there's a tradition there. And then before that, I'm not really sure. Before that, no. So my dad was the first lawyer, I guess, in recent vintage. But
what is dinner like with you guys when there's an argument?
Well, Viva was pretty. He was the force. He was the force to reckon with. So, and I called it early on, by the way. I called him like when he was 12 or 13. I knew his big mouth was going to get him, either into trouble or to get him to much success. So I'm glad it worked out well.
And which number is he and you? So who's the oldest?
He's 5th out of the hatch. I'm 4th out of the hatch. And then.
Oh, wow. So the 2 youngest ones.
The 2 youngest. So that's it.
And then, so the other 3, one of them's not a lawyer. The other 2 are lawyers. And they're all in the GTA area, or are they all spread over?
Yeah, we're all in different areas of the world. We got some 2 in the States, and then 3 of us, and then actually no, now that Viva Frei, Viva's in the States too. So
you call him Viva, even though he's
on when I'm front facing the public, I call him Viva. Behind
that's kind of neat.
He's Dave.
Do you know where that name came from, Viva?
I think it was David. Maybe he took the VI from David. I don't actually know the full Viva.
Someone in my chat, I'm now that you said that, I'm starting to ring a bell that he told that story at least a couple of times on how he got there. Right. I know the Frei is just Freiheit. You take off the height. Yeah, because he's short, right? For the height. I guess that's it.
That's right, to cover for the Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so you guys grew up, you became lawyers, and I kind of want to get into a little bit more of why you decided. Was it inspiration from your dad, your older brothers and sisters were doing it, or you just actually had a taste for it early?
The career in law?
Mm-hmm.
It just kind of happens. You kind of like the discussions, you like the legal analysis, you like legal thinking, and then over time it just kind of builds on you, and you just kind of grow into it. So there was never really a social warrior component to my practice. It was just kind of like the fun of the practice.
All right.
a lot of folks in law school, they have big. I did a lot of pro bono stuff in law school, landlord tenant primarily, but you kind of just, the appeal of law for most people going to, especially like corporate commercial, which is what I'm in, is just kind of the fun of the deals and being involved in some cool transactions.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. So when you're going through law school, you did some administrative stuff, so landlord tenant. And were you drawn in law school to any particular one? Like a lot of people like to get into like criminal, or they want to get into immigration. Like, were you drawn to anything in particular during law school?
It's a good question. I liked mediation, arbitration. I like that stuff. Yeah, that was always cool. And I did the joint business law degree, so I ended up getting drawn into more of the, I guess also the managing the family business, I think, was one of the, or the business transitions, that kind of stuff interested me. But no, I was pretty much a generalist in law school. I did start though in law school I guess that was the beginning of my publication career, or my media career. Was I started an interfaculty newsletter called Nexus, and that was
cool.
Where I got people to write from the law school and from the business school about issues facing, on campus. And that was kind of fun. That was my intro into the world of publishing.
And did you like it? Were you a spin doctor, or were you just straight to the facts? Was it dry? Was it entertaining?
It was fun. I approached it with a bit of a humor point of view. And to make it very entertaining because at the end of the day, students wanted some
know your audience.
Yeah, right, exactly. Right. And the goal was to sell advertising. So, I ended up soliciting ads from some of the law firms in London, Ontario. It was a blast. And then the back page was like, funny Q&As, what was it? I forget. We had basically like a write-in column. So it wasn't too heavy on the legals, but it was fun. It was entertaining, and got some mileage. So that was a lot of fun.
So you kind of got a little nibble of the journalist bug early. So you actually enjoyed some of that a little bit. And I bet you never thought you would be getting into that later in life, or you kind of wanted it, you liked it.
From 2000, so I got called to the bar in 2005, and just avoiding social media as much as possible up until 2020, or 2022. Like I just avoid interacting with the public as much as possible as a lawyer, because it wasn't really just not worth it. I don't know if I'm going full circle on that. Maybe now I'm getting to the point where, what's the point of it all? But honestly, it felt like a crisis that had to be, that I felt more lawyers need to speak out on what's been going on. So,
and as you started to do your career for a bit, was there any areas of law that you said, "Oh, I don't like that," like estate planning or family or anything like that?
The estate plan, the heavy estate stuff, I was avoiding. I would avoid, also
those are
family.
tough.
Those are tough.
And that's when I usually ask the questions, usually the answer, because you're dealing with family, tearing things apart. Someone dies. Now people hate each other. Like, it gets messy.
That's right. And, it becomes all consuming, I think, unless, you get to a certain level, I think, in those areas. Right. Yeah.
Some people have a calling for that, like your mediation. Those would be good techniques for there. But some people have a calling for that. Like, they can really connect well. And it's not for everybody. That's why there's so many areas of law that you can actually really look at.
Yeah. No, I got, I started my career in a commercial leasing boutique, which is pretty much as boring as you could probably imagine, right? All they do is commercial leasing.
I know one more boring.
What?
Trademark law.
I disagree. Trademarks are cool, man. Yeah, you can get some cool stories. Well, for the most part, it's kind of boring, but there are some cool trademark stories.
Like I would say patents are fun. Copyright and trademark, though, the logo and the name and the font.
Yeah. Forgetting into I'm talking more like, if there's disputes over who was using the trademark first.
Oh, sure. That litigation on trademarks. Yeah.
Right.
Litigation in general could be fun. Like, you can take two subjects, throw it together, litigate it. It could be fun. But I can't imagine coming home to the wife saying, "Oh, I got the letter T trademark."
Or the color blue, the bell blue, right?
Yeah.
The bell blue.
And oh no, I was too close to another color, and that's your highlight.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that was the one where I started looking into. I'm like, but patent law was kind of neat because you work with engineers and you're coming up with new ideas and you're working on that kind of stuff. Have you looked at any of that?
Patents are cool. No, there's lawyers that I work with. If a patent issue ever comes up, that's like, you really got to know your stuff for that. So no, I started off in commercial leasing, and then that involved me in some corporate commercial litigation, in some franchising, and then I hung my shingle up pretty early and focused a lot on franchising and corporate work. So forming companies, and then getting involved in some disputes and some litigation, and then became a corporate commercial specialist. Nothing to do with vaccines or human rights or any of this stuff. Except in the context of, as it would come up in the context of small and medium-sized businesses.
Would you by chance know Jordan Dolgan? Would you know Jordan Dolgan? Yeah, he's a good friend of mine. He's one of my mentors when I was coming up. Yeah, he was my corporate lawyer when I was doing my stuff out in Ontario.
He's a good guy.
He's a good guy.
He knows his stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, you're doing corporate stuff. I'm like, okay. And there's another one, Ashton or Ash. Oof, I'll look him up. He's another one that Jordan put me in contact with, which is another good guy. Ashton. Anyways, if it's not ringing the bell for you right now, maybe you don't know. No, but yeah, Jordan Dolgan's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a good guy.
Small world. I'm going to have to text him after and say, hey, look, I just met your buddy Daniel. It's a small world. But you're doing all the corporate stuff.
Corporate's nice because you're not always antagonistic with other lawyers, right? So it's nice to, not that you're necessarily antagonistic with, in litigation, but you're always friends, right? Friends in court. My honorable friend.
Yeah. And they use that in Alberta too. Yeah, honorable friend. And that was one thing I liked about Jordan, because that's what I liked about his demeanor. He wasn't a bulldog. He wasn't trying to go after people.
Right.
And I think those are the better type of lawyers. They're the ones that are sweet and nice to your face and really looking to get things advanced. And when you're not so defensive against them, you actually have your guard down a bit more. So I find that it's a little bit more effective to work that way.
Interesting fact, by the way, the word solicitor. I bet your viewers don't know the etymology of this word. This fascinating word.
Neither does this guy. Please teach us.
Okay. A solicitor, a lawyer, solicitor, it comes from it's two words. It's sol, S-O-L, which means to make whole, okay? And licit or excite means to get into motion. So I think the word comes from this idea, either you're breaking or you're putting it together. I forget which. The idea is that the solicitor is there to break and rebuild and to put things, to get things moving. So important to remember that that's the job of the solicitor, is to actually get things moving.
That's a good way to look at it. First, you have the argument, then you got to tear down the argument, get to the material, bring it back up, and have a solution.
Exactly.
So I guess I can see how that worked out. Because that is what's taught to us, right? We got to take the arguments and try to take out the hearsay and all the other stuff and get that to the meat and potatoes, which is usually a lot less than you started with. And then find solutions, fill in holes, investigate, discover, put it together, and then present. Basically, that's what they taught us.
Right. Well, but that's right. But there's also the barrister, which is different. The barrister is
in the UK. They definitely have both terms, right? The UK, you actually labeled both terms. So what is the difference between the barrister?
Well, now they've merged in Ontario, but the role of the barrister comes from the word bar, which is basically the separation between the lawyer and the judge, and so you're almost overcoming an obstacle, which is to get your version past. You're trying to convince the bar. So there it's
more litigators there.
It's more, it more comes from the idea of, I think, overcoming some type of obstacle in getting what you want, so which is the essence of the litigation.
Right. So the first one is to pass the bar, which is a term used to actually pass the test. Mm-hmm. And the next one is to continuously do that, which is the bar in the court as well. So the barrister would spend a lot of time in court, whereas a solicitor maybe spend more time out of court.
Exactly.
Okay. I was wondering, because the UK, they had that. Like here we say lawyers or advocates, but they had them separated.
And there, to this day still, right? Like I think I was working with specifically a barrister group in the UK, and that's all they do. Like they're just in court, and it's a really weird arrangement there. It's like they're almost like on standby, sitting by the course, just waiting for anyone to just come up to them and take their case, so that they could take the case to the court. So it's interesting.
They're chomping at the bit to practice, right? You want to get in there.
That's right.
But that's all good. So you were on the commercial side of things, which meant you weren't dealing with liberty in life. Like nobody's going to jail if you make a mistake, that kind of stuff. However, mistakes are still not encouraged, especially with corporate. And you also said you were doing franchises. So you were doing some franchise stuff too. That's an interesting one. So let me just ask you there, because I've never really delved into that. And I think Jordan does. I think Jordan may do some of that. I'm not sure. How do you know when the company's ready to be franchised? And how do you tell somebody who comes too early that they came too early?
Putting me on the spot there. Do they have a
No, we can take...
If they can afford to pay the legals, then they're ready to franchise. No, the reality is that they have to have a system that can sell. Like you discourage someone from just, franchising
for the sake
business
of
that doesn't have a
franchising.
track record. You have to have a track record. So, and again, me and my etymology, I like etymology. The idea behind franchising is to free up capital so that the person expanding, the company that's expanding, doesn't want to tie up its own capital in the expansion. So the idea behind franchising is that really you're allowing others to partner in your expansion by using their capital. So really, depending on the business and depending on where the business is in the life cycle, any business can be ready to franchise. It just depends on, I think, the leadership. So, and the business model.
Okay. But, you can easily analyze that when they come in. Like if they don't have something reproducible, you're like, well, let's first start with that. Like you have one store, but how are you going to make a second one and then have someone else run it? So some sort of plan.
Right. And oftentimes, there's a lot of franchise consultants out there in the space now. So they're better able to even in, up and coming franchises to really put the package together.
So there's a consultant level now that will bring it up to the legal level when ready.
They're out there. They find the space. They find the franchisees. So they come to the table already, well prepared. And then the lawyer's job is to really just put together the risk disclosure package. Right.
Very cool. Are there any ones that you can mention that you worked on? Like, did you create the Tim Hortons franchise?
No, but one of my colleagues actually was back in the day was one of the lawyers for the Tim Hortons.
Look at that, small world.
Yeah, no, I now I do a lot of representation also for franchisees, just helping them understand what they're signing.
Okay. Do you get into disputes? So, for example, Tim Hortons, there was some franchisee disputes at some point. They were unhappy, but the company sold. There were some changes. There were some things that happened. So, would you have I'm not saying if you did, but would you have represented in that kind of case?
I probably, for something of that side, because that was a significant litigation. For the stuff I work on is usually smaller scale. Rent disputes with the franchisor, other operational issues with the franchise. Sometimes you just the franchisee that's making the most noise sometimes gets the grease. So you have to know how to push some buttons to get the franchisor to dance sometimes. And I like to use a common sense approach because litigation can kind of sink two ships sometimes. Yeah. So you have to think. Sometimes not to say that litigation should always be discouraged, but oftentimes it's better to find a sensible approach to dispute resolution.
Yeah, and I kind of learned that it was close to 90% of everything settled. It doesn't even make it into court. Is that the kind of same numbers for you as well?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just that 10% where we need to have somebody else let them know.
You got to be ready to go. But you always have to be ready to go. So that's why the budget for litigation, you have to be able to really sink a lot into it.
Follow through.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's nice when those settlements are done because you also get retainer back and other things because you're all done. And you have the same philosophy that, both sides will be a little unhappy. That's a good settlement.
That's right. That's usually the way they say it, right?
Yeah. But in your experience, that's the way you found it too?
No, my clients are always happier than the other side.
I would say that was a perspective situation. From your perspective, absolutely.
Right. Exactly. Subjective.
Yeah. Subjective. There you go too. Are you planning to do other things? Do you want to have your own firm, or do you have your own firm, or are you?
Yeah. So now I operate. So I operate through my own professional corp, and I work in association with two firms. One's and I'm not here to promote myself or either of them.
No, please do. I would like you to.
I don't really. I get onto when I talk advocacy, the Lion Advocacy. I usually stick to the advocacy stuff. But yeah,
Sure.
I do. I operate basically as a as counsel and as a through my professional corporation, handling all kinds of corporate as a corporate commercial specialist. So anything that comes up, up to and including a bit of litigation. So I work with other litigators as well if things really get dicey.
Cool. And the reason why I was asking that is because I wanted to find out if you were an employer or an employee or a partner, like how your setup was, because the next part of this mandate question, it will be reflected on what you do. So do you have partners, or are you self-employed?
So yeah, so I operate through a professional corporation independently. So not a partner, not an employee.
Sole employee?
Yeah, I'm basically a sole employee of my professional corp. That's the way most lawyers are set up
Right. So that will actually give you a unique perspective on what happened to mandates, because you didn't have an employer telling you, and you didn't have to tell someone else to do it. You had to make your own decisions and stuff on whether or not you were going to do mandates.
That's a good question. I think lawyers generally, so I'll leave my personal situation, aside. Generally, lawyers working in a firm, even if they're operating independently, whether as employees, independent contractors, or whatever, they would be subject to the policies of the firm, even if they're trade contract, whatever they are. I don't know generally what. I don't actually know what law firms. I don't think they were strict with having everyone get vaccinated for the most part. I think most lawyers were working remotely, could work remotely, so it didn't really come up so much. I think there was a push generally on Bay Street to get, everyone vaccinated, but I don't recall hearing so much about it, by this date or you're done, like there was in so many of the other industries.
And that could be because the Law Society itself didn't take a position, correct?
I didn't think so either. However, I had a rude awakening when I learned that the Great Library, didn't allow unvaccinated people into the library.
Ooh.
That shook my world, and I couldn't understand it. I couldn't understand the logic or who was giving that guidance. Was there an expert? Was there, right? And so the Law Society did, in the end, kind of have a position on this, and I was a bit, surprised by it.
And disappointed?
Disappointed to the point where I did try to discuss it. I did raise it with the Law Society. I even brought a motion at the annual general meeting. Actually, I might publish that. There was an article published on Law 360.
And it doesn't even matter if you're vaccinated or not. Like you thought that was a bad policy to have.
Yeah, independent of my personal vaccination status, this policy went as far as August 2022, when well beyond what was in the public domain about transmission. So I kind of understand people's anxiety if they think everyone's a super spreader, and if they think an unvaccinated person is filled with COVID and going to immediately breathe on someone.
Well, be careful for YouTube at this point.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, because we're getting pretty close to
I gotta be
countering WHO there. Yeah, sorry about that, because I'm trying to keep this more professional. I hear you.
Anyhow, I
guess. Sorry, YouTube.
I would like to withdraw my comment. Man, what kind of world are we living in where we can't?
It's frustrating, and I apologize for that.
No, I don't. The last thing I do is blame you. What did I want to try to say? I guess the point was August 2022 was a surprising date that they had this policy in force until, to the point where I felt it was important to try to, and just the way the Law Society did it, it was done by some weird corporate statement of the CEO, like an edict, and I thought it should have been decided on by everybody. Like we should have all had
like an order in council, like an executive order, like just coming down from the big boss type of thing. No debate, no nothing.
I think they all delegate. I think the benchers delegated the decision, directly or indirectly to the CEO. But I looked over the bylaws. I was like, I don't think this is the correct, as a corporate lawyer. I was like, I think there's a different way this should have been done. Not to say that it was impossible to have the mandate. I just think it should have according to the Constitution of the Law Society, because you're changing the Constitution metaphorically and literally. When you bar certain people from coming into the building, you literally are changing the Constitution of who's going to be a lawyer and how they're going to be lawyering when you exclude them from the Law Society building. So I thought,
Does that splash of cold water in your face when you realize that?
Yeah, it was like the Darth Vader moment. I was like, here I was appointed everybody other industry. I'm like, you guys are all excluding, and then they're like, wait a second, your own Law Society is excluding unvaxxed.
Right.
I'm like, oh man. I was like, and there anyhow.
So I had the same moment in 2020. I'm going to get to that in a moment with you.
Oh, you had the same? Okay.
Yeah, separate subjects, same Law Society. I'll get to that in a moment with you.
I hear these. I see your comments for people who are losing their jobs. Ruin my life. Income. Okay.
Yep.
What set me off? I don't know if we're transitioning to the different discussion. What set me off on this advocacy thing? Okay, was a phone call I received in February of 2022, January. Two of them, two very similar. Remote workers being canned, being tossed, like discarded. I was like, remote workers, what's going on here? Like, I was just minding my own business, working, up until then, trying to navigate different. But then when remote workers started getting axed in January, February of 2022 for not getting vaccinated, people who bent over backwards for their employers up until then during the pandemic, and that's not easy to isolate at home, work at home. People that had given everything were overnight, like, and not just like, here's severance, here's 6 months, here's a year, I'm really sorry, hug, sorry we have to do this. It was more like, you got to get this or you're being terminated for cause. I'm like, and just so your audience knows, cause. When you're terminated for cause, okay, that's like the capital punishment in the employment world. That means you've done something really bad and you're a bad person, like, you know what I mean? And so when you terminate someone for cause, a remote worker for not getting vaccinated, I mean, there's a lot of ways you can terminate someone, okay? And you just say goodbye. Next day they're fired. But you pay them, you give them a bit of notice. But when you terminate people for cause, for remote workers, and I got a lot of these, I was like, holy cow, we got a problem. This is not right. This is a serious problem. And the dicey part is, okay, depending on the level of knowledge at what point, okay, healthcare workers, were they a higher risk? We quickly learned and I don't want to get too much into the censorship stuff, but
you can call it the drug because they don't catch that. So if you say the drug instead of the V word, yeah.
Oh, can we talk about AI? How AI is screwing everything up too?
I'll get there too because I know a lot about AI. Yeah, we can get there too.
So that's when I kind of like, okay, I got to do something. I got to, I tried to publish on LinkedIn, but it wasn't really like the right format. Law Times picked me up a couple of times, but to really get the stuff off my chest, I needed Twitter. And that's where it's been going since. Terminated for cause, refusing to submit to an experimental drug therapy. Yeah. Okay. Yep. So many of those. Yeah. So many. And I still got a couple, like I've just overloaded. Like I've got a couple in the pipes now, and these, and I got to make sure, that I can wrap up the cases that I've got, like basically wrongful termination for the,
and there's a lot, because I remember speaking to one lawyer just after I left Ontario, and I said, hey, how are things? He's like, look, I got nothing but wrongful dismissal and employment law. Can you help me out? I'm like, I moved to Alberta. I can't. But yeah, there was a lot of that going around.
Where you're licensed now in Alberta or just?
No, paralegal in Ontario. There's no paralegal program here.
Oh, right.
I'm talking to the actual government about creating one, and I want to be grandfathered into it. So maybe one day I'll be licensed again for Alberta, but there's no paralegal program here. But let me tell you about where I kind of had my heart sunk. This was in 2020. This was during early in the lockdown. I got a CPD notice, so continued professional development, and there was 4 extra hours for critical race theory course. Do you remember that?
I don't.
It was in 2020.
Yeah, 4 extra. Okay.
4 extras. Yeah, it was on top of the 20, so it was 4 additional that year.
Oh God. Okay, I don't remember that.
You might have been doing
I'm
a lot
good
of
on my CPD though. Okay, so yeah, go on.
You would have known because they would have told you had to do those 4 hours as well. And this was where it just basically started to talk about how you have to respect race and you have to respect people and be sensitive with it. You have to understand that you have a role and you have to be sensitive to the other side as well. They didn't go as far as saying, don't do your job. They just said, you got to be sensitive when you're working with the other side. You don't remember that training?
I'd like to speak to my lawyer before answering any further questions.
Yeah.
It's, 2020 was a world ago.
A
But
while ago. It was a while ago. Because on our profile on the CPD, it does ask for race and gender. You can choose to not answer it, but it is asked.
Okay, so how did that? So that's what set you off onto what, on your path of what?
My
free speech?
concern was that we're all being trained to be sensitive because of our race. And that training scared me, because if you have an issue with that particular issue, well, our courts are already indoctrinated to be sensitive with that issue and have already taken a position. And that was my reading of that CPD course, was going forward, because of my race, I'm actually going to have to be extra sensitive, or else I could have problems and have things reported on me in this area. So that concerned me, because if I have a problem with that, it's the same system I have to go to. Much like when your library is not allowing vaccination, where do you file a complaint and a motion when the Law Society itself is not following its constitution? Well, you file it against the Law Society.
It's funny, and this is going on with the Law Society for a long time, right? Because this was the whole EDI, right? The whole transformation that's been happening since, I don't even know when it was, 2012.
2020 is when I first saw it, because I was only in there since 2018. Like, I passed my test 2017, joined the Law Society, then from then on. But yeah, 2020 is when I had that.
I think you had a different curriculum than we did, as maybe either that particular program that you were required to take for new. Because I don't recall it being that. Nothing was that. At least the topics I chose for my EDI were actually interesting and kind of cool.
Don't know. Well, I did a lot of administrative. I did administrative, so that was on my list. So I'd be dealing with the public a lot. And there was a couple others I did, small claims court. So again, public a lot. Okay. And those were the two main ones that I did. I don't know. Maybe I was selected. Maybe I answered a question. Maybe everybody has to do something at one point. Maybe yours is still coming. Who knows? If you get 4 extra hours above the 20, then maybe that's the program, because that's what I had. And I was surprised, because it wasn't even included in the 20. It was just, you had to do it. I think I had like a 3-month window to do it, or else, of course, you get those, you're not finishing your CPD warnings, and then you can get, consequences. There could be penalties for that.
So in terms of that, right, conformity of thought, and how much lawyers, because there is a certain, you look at the professional rules, we are required to conform to certain, regulatory standards and code of ethics, a code of practice. Like, there is a expectation that we think a certain way, that we behave a certain way. Where that extends is kind of, an interesting question, right? Like, where to your personal, like, what part of your personal life is now governed by these rules of pursuit? And that's right. Where, Twitter's an interesting space in that regard. I try to be clear that these are my personal advocacy views. I don't even put it that I'm a lawyer on my Twitter account, but people figure it out because of the MBA LLB. But it's an interesting question. For me, it came to the fore. There was a case where out west, I forget where it was, actually, Manitoba, where a lawyer was, well, 2 cases actually. One was the Groya case, the Supreme Court of Canada case in Groya, where a lawyer in court was going real like a bulldog against the OSC. And his language in court was real strong, and he was just being real hardcore. And they didn't like his style in court. And so the Law Society, dragged him. He went all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada on whether he was allowed to behave the way he was behaving, whether his thought pattern and speech pattern, were in keeping with professional standards. And he ended up winning, but not after spending millions in legal fees and, spending his whole career making a name for himself in this regard. But he's pretty much my hero in this regard now. And he's a bencher, I think, still. So
tell everybody what a bencher means.
A bencher means
it's a Law Society position.
It's basically,
right?
I think it's the board of directors of the Law Society, effectively. So they're the ones that call the shots, make policies, and they're the ones at the top of our regulatory body. They sit on committees, and they drive a lot of policy.
Perfect.
So after the Law Society came after him, he ended up, Game of Thrones. he joined the Law Society as a bencher to make sure that other lawyers had a bit of, I guess maybe there were better safeguards in place. I don't know.
Is he still there?
I think he's still there.
I'd be curious what he thinks
Joseph
about the
Roy.
mandate stuff with the library being vax only. I wonder what he would think
Yeah,
about all that stuff.
good question. And that's why I wanted to go to a vote of the benchers. I want to see who's in favor, who's opposed. Let's see on the record. It's important to know. So, but we never got there.
So now I'm going to transition us into the impact that mandates, the lockdown, and the COVID situation had on law in general. So one of the first things that happened was there was lockdown. So at one point, courts closed down.
Hold on, let me get
serious stuff, I believe.
One second, hold on.
Yeah, go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Lockdowns. Yeah. Because at one point, I think serious stuff, like criminal stuff, like serious stuff, still kept going. But small claims court closed down, administrative stuff closed down, so landlord-tenant, and a few others. And then they also came up with some sort of statements like landlord-tenant, for example, said you can't be evicted for non-payment of rent during this period of time. So moratorium on certain things. First, were you surprised that the Law Society did that? Because we have remote technology. We could have Zoomed a whole bunch of stuff all along. Like, were you surprised that the legal profession did that?
My brain did that? That's a good question. My brain space at the time was like in a different world. Like I was in survival mode in some ways. Okay.
Like most of us, we thought it was real.
Right. Kids home from, like I just wasn't thinking. I'm like, okay, yeah, that sounds about right. Shut down the whole system. Yeah, okay, I'm in. Sure. 2 weeks to flatten the curve. We got to shut it all down. Like that's what they say. So, at the time, it made kind of I don't know if it made sense, but I just I'm in the zone. I'm a soldier of His Majesty's, so I'm like, okay, do what you got to do. And
this is masking time. This wasn't vaccine yet. Vaccine wasn't ready yet. It's just mask time, and people getting sick. Yeah. So I can see why the concern was still there at that time, because we really didn't know yet.
For me, it wasn't. The law was less of a concern. I was more concerned about the economics, like what was going to happen to debt, because I didn't understand how the whole system could keep operating. If you have companies that are expecting rent from major tenants, and the tenants can't pay the rent, and then those pension funds or whatever owners of real estate can't pay their pensions. Like I was amazed that the system kept going. So kudos, credit to all levels of government in that regard. Like it smooth operations. But on the legal side, when they froze things, like, okay, so what's going to happen to limitations periods and all this stuff? I remember actually on the day they locked down, I actually had to get something filed in court, and the lockdowns were, and we didn't know what the status was going to be. So I actually recall personally driving to the court. I forget where it was. I think in Newmarket, to make sure it got in, because we didn't know what would happen if the courts were locked. What happens to limitations periods? What happens if you have a certain period of time to file something? But every common sense prevailed in that regard, which was
paused, right?
Right, everything put on pause.
They were able to take everything was that period didn't count toward statute limitation.
Right.
And of course, that's common sense. That would make a ton of sense. But paying your dues and paying your mortgage and a whole bunch of other things weren't paused. So if you had a law office that wasn't open for those 2 weeks, you're still paying your rent. There's a bunch of other things that are not paused, your salaries for people. Now, you didn't have that, but I'm sure you've heard stories and people who did. So how did the Law Society, not the Law Society, the law profession handle that? Were people being paid? Were they taking loans? Like, what was going on?
That's a good question. I think for the most part, law was, they talk about law, the practice of law, the privilege, right? The privilege of law. Like you see it. I saw it then. I still see it now. The privilege of being able to work remotely, the privilege of lawyers being able to, and judges being able to have court remotely on Zoom. I
found that effective and efficient too.
It is, but let's get back to it, because I actually don't like that we're still on Zoom for a lot of hearings. I want to get back to that at some point. Maybe one of us. I have actually marked down as a note. I think for the most part, like it was, the level of disruption was pretty minimal. because again, there's also a lot of financing available for law firms that had to put employees on suspended pay or whatever.
Right. That was my question. So there was some sort of financial loans or cheap credit or something along those lines.
I believe, yeah, I believe like any small business, or where there was rent debate, like there was help at the provincial, I forget what it was, provincial, federal.
Even the banks had some programs too.
Yeah, exactly. So in that regard, I don't think lockdowns disrupted the practice of law too much. I think where the biggest disruption was just psychologically, a lot of lawyers, especially the sole practitioners, not being able to go to the functions that they had been used to going to. And that really does take a toll on skills. I think it takes a toll on, just the emotions of the lawyer, bouncing ideas off people. Like, I think that the isolation affected the practice of law in that regard, right? You couldn't there was no water cooler talk for lawyers anymore. And a lot of important ideas are exchanged that way. And so in that regard, I think the lockdowns did have an impact. But that being said, it's an essential service. So anyone who wanted to could freely go, into work or into to certain work locations, not to the conferences, but
And when the courts were open, I think they took a while, because I actually worked for United Counties SDNG, and they had a provincial court there. And the very first thing we did was lock down, and court was off, but we had remote access for everything set up. And then the first thing they started to do was remote for tickets and other things, like trying to get those to happen, to keep that revenue going, because for the county, tickets is actually a revenue for the county. So they started to run it as a court, started to run into issues with revenue that they need to address as well. And by the way, that was an eye opener to understand how much the court relies on revenue from tickets to operate. They do.
Interesting.
Yes.
Right.
I was actually disturbed by that, because it did create the environment where they were asking the RCMP, who was contracted to get tickets, to write all tickets, please. That was a bit of a push from the court in order to pay bills. I was there at some of those meetings.
To write all tickets? What do you mean?
Well, they were letting some stuff go. They weren't writing all speeding tickets. They were letting people go. So the encouragement was to write all tickets. If it's a ticketable offense, write it.
Oh, wow.
And that was the encouragement, because they needed their numbers to go up. Now, it wasn't an order, and they didn't have to do it. It was an encouragement, and they were very careful in those wording. Because the government can't tell police what to do. But when they're contracted to be your police force to write tickets, you can certainly insinuate and imply that the numbers are low and they need to be higher.
Wow. I don't even know what to make of that.
I was surprised too, because I thought that the entire court was funded by the province. I didn't think that there was this relationship with the actual income from tickets, but there is, at least at that one.
But that leads to a whole cascading now, a bunch of questions. Like, that's not my area at all. Like, I just did my, provincial offenses, it wasn't a provincial, it was a Quarantine Act ticket recently.
I was going to get to that soon, because there's some of these tickets that came up in the middle of COVID that were questionable.
Right. But so then I start to get a flavor of what's going on behind the scenes in terms of, like, what's the politics, because it's, the law is one thing, there's politics and there's policy on the other. So yeah, I didn't think of just regular tickets. If no one's driving, right, what happens to the court budgets? And
yeah, that was a concern. There was an emergency meeting because the roads were not producing tickets. There was an emergency meeting on how to do that.
Okay, well,
and that bothers me, because I thought there would be at least, like, how do you not have a budget to run for the year, and it doesn't matter how many tickets come in?
Well, you probably do, but it puts pressure that somebody has to sit. No.
Nope. They have budget the salaries, and they budget the fixed capital costs, but there's a bunch of other stuff that they can't get if they don't get tickets, like additional software, upgraded packages of things. We can't buy new hardware. If that server needs to be done, where's that money coming from? There's a lot of costs there that are recovered absolutely by the tickets.
Wow.
Just the way it is.
Food for thought.
But yeah, and they're also all kind of disconnected. They use different software. Half the courts use one type of software. Other courts make their own software. It's really disconnected too. Because CAM is the most popular one. CAMS, Court Administration Management System, and that came out of Niagara's court. But half of Ontario used it, and the other half had their own systems, but they all interface with a really old mainframe system that the government runs for the docket. So the dockets are all maintained on a large system, an old system that the province runs. Oh, I was in the IT part of that. That's why I know so much about all that.
Wow. Okay, that's very interesting.
Yeah, I guess you can interview me about the tech in court one day. Happy to go through all that. But those are some of the eye openers for me. So when the Law Society started to do this critical race theory and started telling me to be sensitive, take race and I even think gender was in there, but race was definitely the highlight, and use that as part of my adjusting my behavior towards the other side. I'm like, oh, like I didn't understand why that was such an issue, but maybe I'm on the wrong side of that problem, I guess. I don't know.
Well,
But
look,
I
that's
saw
created the whole split in the law, right? The whole split in the bencher and what they call the slate, right? So that's at least into whatever that was, the last election, 2018.
Yeah.
But
and the main. Go ahead.
Yep.
No, I was going to say the main thing that they were trying to make sure I understood was to treat people better based on race. Now, they didn't say you could just go crazy on non-POC. The whole conversation, the whole module was on identifying and respecting POC. And that's really how that material was delivered to me. Now, I didn't leave the profession because of that. I ended up leaving for other reasons. I leave in Ontario. I wanted more land and more opportunity. And Doug Ford was pinging my phone and telling me to go home when I went and bought gas for the barbecue. I didn't like that. I didn't like that at all.
Oh, wow. Actually, that's impressive.
Yeah, it was only 2 kilometers away.
Wait, was that? I don't think I ever. Wait, that was based on what? That wasn't just based on an area-wide notification, was it? Or was it specific?
No, because my wife didn't get it either. I left my home.
That's
went
next
to
level.
got propane. Went to got propane just down the street for the barbecue. It's only 2 kilometers down the road. I'm rural. And as I'm at the store, burp, 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 you must return home. There's a lockdown. You can only leave for essential items. It didn't say, Jason, you must return home. It just says you have to. And then when I got home, I said, did you get this emergency one as well? No.
When was this?
Oh, interesting. Oh, gosh. This would have been like 1 month into it with the first lockdowns. Because we ran a guess. We were planning. Yeah. Because 2020 was when I had some eye opening. I'm like, why are they buzzing my phone? Why CRT and the Law Society? And then we were starting to get into the conversation about. I was wondering why my employer wasn't doing what was it called? Not immunity tests, antibody testing. So early into this whole thing, again, I worked for the government. I'm the guy that created the remote system for the government. So everybody got to work at home because I set up that system. And I asked them about coming back. This was really early. This is way before the drug came around. And I'm like, look, I'm concerned. Nobody wants to get sick. And I have 2 young kids who have actual health issues if they get respiratory problems. So I said, are we going to antibody test? And they said, no. I said, well, can you find out? And they went to talk to the chief medical for Eastern Ontario to ask, are we doing antibody testing? And the answer came back, no, we're not doing antibody testing. They were just going to do isolation for now and then have certain people come in, keep them separate, rotate them, this whole thing. But I pushed this whole issue about antibody testing, and then I had a constructive dismissal. So I no longer work there, and I decided to leave Ontario to try something new in Alberta. So that's kind of how that
antibody
unraveled.
testing is logical. It's
logical if you can only get it once, like the chicken pox, and if you can test and you have it. That was my argument. Like if we know we had it, I got sick in December 2019. Yeah, 2019. Right. So before the big one in 2020, I was really sick in December. For 2 weeks, and that's unusual for me. And my wife had a cough that lasted months that came out of December. So we actually suspected that maybe we caught it early. So I wanted to antibody test to find out. Because if that was the case, well, then I can go to the office and I can keep working because I'm safe. I already had it. They weren't doing that. They weren't interested in that. And I became a problem to them because I kept pushing that issue.
So I wonder if antibody testing is like how that would line up with the Genetic Non-Discrimination Act. Is it basically like, are you discriminating on the basis of some type of genetic characteristic potentially? that would be my biggest concern there.
Well, if it's mRNA, then you can certainly talk genetic.
Right. If it involves, I guess antibodies aren't. I don't even know. Are antibodies RNA, DNA?
No, the problem was there was no test. They weren't talking about bringing a test, and this just wasn't on their radar. What they're on their radar was 6 feet apart, masks, rotate shifts, not together. Like those were all the things
which is the most inclusive way to do it without discriminating on the basis of health status. Like, yeah, I think that would kind of right. That made kind of sense at the time.
No, but now that we understand it a little bit more years later, there were different variants and it did mutate and it would be tough and you can get it a second time. All of that stuff came out a little bit later.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But at the early onset of it, because it was being said, once you get it, it's gone. It's the same as chickenpox, yada, yada. And that was our thinking around that time. Because I thought it would be effective. Like if I had the antibodies, I'm not a threat to anybody. Test me. Like I'm all for that test. I wasn't for the other tests, up the nose and that kind of stuff. I wasn't for those.
Yeah, but, look, if you willingly submit to it, that's a different issue. I think, right. If you willingly submit to any test, that's totally different. It's where they make it a condition for employment, where I think there's some there's some unforeseen diciness to that approach, which I'm curious how it's going to land. And that's kind of my pinned tweet now is on this whole thing. The fact that the PCR tests inadvertently, may have violated the Genetic Non-Discrimination Act because you're basically testing for RNA, DNA. They're going to say it's a foreign RNA. It's like it's the RNA of the virus or something, right?
Put that on the record so everybody knows there is foreign RNA.
So
establish that.
But then we're hearing people where something happens and it incorporates into your actual gene, like into a person's actual genes. So you could still test positive for months or years, even though you're not. So like the status, like it's a foreign RNA that can become an endemic. I don't know. It's the whole RNA tests were kind of a dicey approach that, may require a second visit.
And also, if there's a modification, is your DNA original anymore? And there's some other problems that might be coming up there. And is it your DNA if it's been modified? I know that they're pushing some of those questions. If your DNA has been modified, is it still yours? What a weird question to have, don't you think?
It is weird. It is weird stuff.
And there's also patents on some of this stuff. And
right.
It's an interesting world. Now we can get back into the patent law because there's a lot of weird stuff about this as well. But yeah, some of these were weird to me. Now, when we started to get back into court now, so now I'm taking you through, we're not quite yet at vaccination, but we're all wearing masks and court's starting to open up a little bit because, well, we need some justice and things were backing up. Did you get back into it right away? Was there a rush? Was it easy for you? When you started to get back in at that time, can you explain to us what it was like for you?
Like I'm not in court that much. Like I'm not I'm not.
But you could file stuff and mail's coming back into you now and things are starting to move again.
Yeah, like it adapted relatively quickly, right? In terms of filing stuff, what do they call it? Case, I forget now. Like the courts allowed uploading. It wasn't entirely smooth, but it acted pretty fast. Where you could upload documents, massive amounts of documents to the system and avoid having, process servers attend to court, wait in line. Like in that regard, there's been some great savings, and great process changes that were long overdue. So once things ironed out, I think those changes were very welcome. And some hearings, courts were like very adamant about not having parties attend, case conferences by phone. Like they had to actually show up. And so that shifted away very quickly to necessity of whatever, however you can dial in, zoom in, whatever it is, we'll take it. And that was interesting. So I think the courts and the profession adapted. I think like in hindsight, it wasn't, instantaneous, but it was pretty effective, I thought. So, yeah.
Because sorry, I was going to say most of that work can be done remote and filed in. Yeah. But when it came to the actual litigation, some of the challenge I ran into was being able to really gauge the room. So he was out there, pass papers back and forth, walk up and be in the space of a witness. It was a little bit different, and we're not really prepared for not being able to see body language, or if they're wearing a mask, even if they were in court, you can't see some of their face. Like I know that I didn't do much because I ended up moving, but I did do some remote stuff out in Ontario while I was here. And it was a different experience to do the litigation that way. I kind of liked it and I kind of didn't like it. Were you the same way?
So no, I'm very opinionated on this. I think it really depends on the litigant. I think whoever's rights have been impacted should be able to choose what setting they want. Meaning, okay, if a person feels like an in-person hearing is better, is more advantageous to them, I think they should have to have that right. If you deprive someone of that
Now you're
right,
talking about the plaintiff or the person filing?
whatever it is, if it's even a defendant, has certain rights where if they feel their case is going to be prejudiced by not having it in person, I think the defendant should also be able to say, let's move this over to, in person, because I'm not able to get the evidence out there properly. I'm not able to convince the judge or the jury, whatever it is. And that's even in case conferences, even in, now, if someone doesn't feel comfortable attending in person, that's okay, fine. So they got to get a medical exemption, a doctor's note saying I can't attend in person. I'm anxious, whatever it is. But you switch the onus. Like, I don't know how Canada compares now globally. The fact that we've moved everything onto Zoom, I'd be very interested in hearing. I don't know how many your viewers are in other parts of the world, but like, what's United States doing? What's Australia, New Zealand? I'd be interested in what other jurisdictions are doing for in-person versus remote. Again, there's a lot of savings, and it's, I've got to deal with, if you're dealing with a ticket 3 hours north of Toronto, like, of course, most litigants would probably say, okay, I'll take the chance and avoid the in-person, just do the Zoom hearing. But I don't know, depends on the case, depends on the hearing. So
especially family law, I can expect that one might have been
family
more
law,
challenging.
the way I see it, okay, is if in a case where something has been taken from you, okay, and you need to have that presence to address the person who's taken from something from you, whether it's your job, a severance, pension, anything. Sometimes when you see that person in front of you, you'll give them what they want. You're more likely to give them what they want. You know what I mean? It's a bit of a psychological thing, but it comes down to the basic idea of like, there's this computer barrier that really gives the upper edge to, depending on the person. But in the case of wrongful dismissal, it gives the advantage to the person who's depriving the other of property. And so I think it's a real shame what we've kind of automatically kind of shifted into without really discussing it as a legal community. Even maybe it's discussed privately among the judges, but I think it's a real prejudice to some parties, and I'm feeling it on some cases.
Yeah, and there's a reason why we do it in person to begin with. We didn't do it by letter or anything else. We've always done it in person.
To the point where if you didn't show up in person, you were going to jail. Like you can't dial it in, right? If you dialed in on certain, like, oh, Judge, I'm here, I'm on the phone. Like, no, you were ordered to come in. You're in jail. We're putting you in contempt. And people have gone to jail for dialing in when they should have been there in person. So back then, whatever it was, 2-3 years ago, and prior, we recognized in person was a burden. Like that was part, depending on the situation, or a benefit that had to be recognized as such. And so there's got to be more, it's got to be a more mindful approach to this shift to Zoom, I think. Again, there's so many advantages to it because it saves gas, scheduling, there's tons of advantages. But for certain hearings, no way, man. There's got to be in person.
I would agree with that. So maybe classifications of certain types, like administrative law, you can Zoom that.
Yeah,
family,
exactly.
wills, estates, where you got to open it up and kind of be there in person, keep it in person.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool.
Yep.
Now my next subject is an interesting one that I actually don't know the answers to because I left before it all really happened. COVID tickets. So tickets related to COVID in any way, shape, or form. So masks or whatnot, including the coming back to Canada, you had to go to the hotel, that kind of stuff. So let's just group that up as COVID ticket.
Okay.
Now what I was taught in law school was laws are debated, legislated, they're passed through the House or parliamentary if you're on the provincial level, and then eventually they are ticketed or used, and then they're tested in court to stand up on whether or not they're any good. And it's really not until it goes all the way to the test of the court that it's really established as a law. Now, the COVID tickets were kind of just on a bylaw level, even just started to be issued, and they weren't tested, and there were thousands of them. What ended up happening with these COVID tickets? For example, Randy Hilliard got some just for showing up to work. So what ended up happening? Are they sticking? Or what's going on with this?
It's a mixed bag. It's a mixed bag. The reality is that the law was passed. There is a Quarantine Act, and there was an order in council, or, well, don't get me started. Don't get me started.
Please do. I want to get to the bottom of this one.
Something fishy happened, okay, with a lot of the order, with one of the COVID set of tickets, meaning the requirement to use ArriveCan. Something fishy happened there in terms of when the order officially came that it had to be ArriveCan, like that you would need it. So for tickets for that, I'm talking. It wasn't clear when that officially became law or why it became law, because at the end of the day, it's just information. You can give information in many ways. You don't need an app to give information. You could just verbally give it to an officer. So why give a ticket to someone if they're prepared to give you the information through verbal means? So there's a question there.
So to be clear to everybody, you had to use the app to cross the border. And if you didn't use the app, you get a ticket.
Correct. And this is
where... even if you didn't have a cell phone, what happened then?
You had to access a terminal somewhere along the way or go to a terminal in the airport. I'm not sure. But there were Luddites out there, I heard, that they don't use cell phones, and they were seriously prejudiced by this. Mm-hmm. So the point is, some of these COVID tickets were included in either regulation, or they were authorized under orders in council, or there was something in the Quarantine Act that allowed for them. But yeah, others, I'm not clear if the legislation was properly implemented. And I think a lot of tickets did get tossed on that basis, meaning the timing of the law, like they were giving tickets without actually having a law in place to justify it.
Right. I think no statute backed.
No statute backed. I think it only really came into play in late summer of 2022. That's when ArriveCan was formally published as a requirement under law. Up until then, it was just like everybody was just kind of like wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Let's get the Canadians to think that they have to download this. And you can come back into Canada using only this, means. So in terms of whether those tickets are still holding, I mean, I think it really depends on so many factors at this point. Different areas of the country, I think, are adopting different strategies. I think how the tickets are getting processed for prosecution affect whether they're going through, like whether they're going to be charged. Meaning, I think some of the prosecutors don't want to touch them. They're just like, they'll find any way to avoid them because it's an unpleasant experience. They're expensive. You're taking up a couple of hours potentially in court, like with high tech people, like you're talking about like health officers, constables, CBSA, like you're talking a full, like it just doesn't make sense based on, the cost benefit at this point. I think is just let them all go.
And right, like when you get a traffic ticket, you can have the police officer come in as a witness to validate the information around the traffic ticket, the circumstances. Who would you bring in for a COVID ticket? Same officer that would write it?
CBSA, so the custom, what do they call it? The whatever it is, the custom officials, like Canadian Border Service Agency. So that person, potentially a police officer, public health agency officer, and who else? I think that's pretty much it. So 3-4 people potentially, and then the crown prosecutor or the city prosecutor, whoever's handling the ticket for the federal government. I'm talking Quarantine Act tickets, which is federal. For the bylaw stuff, I'm not too familiar. I think I just saw that one up in where was it? $37,000 ticket up there.
For one person?
One person who really was putting her, thumbing the order there during the height of lockdowns.
Was that accumulated tickets or one ticket?
That's a good question.
That's because I can't imagine
a series of protests that was being organized. It was in the news. One of the viewers probably know it. But the point is, what I didn't realize was that so the justice of the peace in that decision was like, if I just let the case go, it's going to bring the system of justice into disrepute, according to that opinion.
That's their argument for a lot of things that
right? But here's what then I couldn't figure this out. But some other protests were okay during COVID. Like there,
yes,
some of the BL, I think it was the
other
BLM.
ones, some of the other ones, yep,
right?
for sure,
The BLM
were allowed.
But so that didn't make sense. Like that didn't make sense to me. And I think at the time a lot of public health officials said those were justified because of there was a separate pandemic. I think I'm not sure what the rationale was, but so okay, they're going to say, well, if we were to prosecute both those, then the system of justice would get into like I don't get the reasoning, there. It's a bit hard to understand, but so I say just let them all go, let them drop all these things at this point. But I don't know.
Well, they tried to do that here in Alberta, right? So Danielle Smith, she kind of ran on that when she was going for the leadership of the UCP.
And she got in trouble?
She said, look, not only did she get in trouble, she found out very quick that she doesn't have that power.
Right.
You can't vitiate tickets. You're not even supposed to direct the
Crown.
The legal, yeah,
right.
You're not supposed to at all. And you can make recommendations; those are allowed, but you cannot make orders or requirements.
Right.
So she can't.
And, it's funny though because it makes sense, right? Because if you have everyone's beef was the fact that the premier or whoever is controlling everything all the way down the chain of command, right? And you don't want that. And so I get why, okay, let's create the stop gaps between the premier and everyone below. Even though it's like, okay, guys, you call them in for a meeting and like, I can't tell you what to do. Here's our budget. I don't think this makes sense. Go do with it what you want. There's indirect ways of getting at the same end. At the end of the day, if someone's recording it, it still looks like the same thing, that you're trying to interfere with the administration of justice. So I don't know. It's a tough one. You want someone to help. You want someone to, implement your version of justice. But how do you do that? Because everyone has different versions of justice. I don't know.
That's the problem, isn't it? Like my version and your version and their version's not the same.
Right? Tough times.
And that's because we actually have different problems, like much different situations. Like you live in, sorry, you said you were in Toronto, or?
Yeah, I'm in,
you're in Etobicoke. Yeah, you're in Etobicoke. So the requirements for you is a little bit different than me. For example, you're close to the court. I have to travel far for the court. Silly things like that. But yeah, the environment's a little bit different too. Now, how did okay, so now we're at the tickets. Some of them, especially on the bylaw level, likely getting tossed like crazy. But the federal level, like this $2,000 staying in the hotel thing, I can imagine there's a lot of people that push back on that and are trying to get some money back because they can't even afford it. Like to begin with, it wasn't something that they even wanted to pay for. Are you seeing any of that or hearing about any of that? Are people trying to claw back some of that?
A lot. Well, you mean because they had to pay? Who they have to? I don't even know.
Yeah. So let's say you were in Florida. This came in place. You were already out of the country. To get back in, it cost you like $6,000. I would say that that's something that some people would want to have back. They didn't know that when they left. It became a requirement, and it was a hefty requirement too. $2,000 a night.
Was it actually? Wow, man, government rates.
Yeah, you couldn't pick the hotel. You had to stay at the one they gave you. $2,000 a night, and they weren't fancy. Like you saw the pictures of the food and stuff. It looked like Fire Festival. If you know what I'm referring to there, it's just horrible food.
I mean, at the end of the day, like that's a different issue. I feel like when money's on the line with the government, that's a different issue to an extent, right? So meaning like, okay, if someone paid $4,000, yeah, for some people that's actually
that's a lot of money for some people.
Right?
Yeah,
and there's no resources to even challenge it. Like to hire a lawyer or paralegal to get your money back is going to cost you the same amount. So you're really, the government's inadvertently creating. I mean, they're just burying this class of folks that can't. Right? They're
a class of folks that can't, and they also discourage a class of folks from going because you're gonna have to come back and spend that. Yep. So I think it was also an anti-travel type of thing. So don't travel, or you're gonna have to spend $4,000 or $6,000 to come back.
Yeah, I mean, it's when it gets to a level where the economic harm becomes a human, a cycle, like a physical well-being harm. That's where I kind of scratch. But like, when does that line get crossed? Meaning, when someone's deprived of employment insurance, which is what this federal government did, right? Or when you deprive them of basic amounts of money so that they can't get a job, they lose. At what point does it become no longer a financial injury, but it becomes a real human right / or a well-being? Like you're actually going after the health. You're actually attacking their health, not
the welfare of someone.
Right. And I think the court, like there was a Supreme Court, I don't know the law on this, but there is a point at which where the economic interference can be so profound, or the way it's done can be so damaging to a person that it is a form of like almost like torture. And that's kind of where with the bank freezes, that's where I kind of got like, holy cow, man, you're messing around here. You're taking this next level. You're preventing people from buying food. People didn't want to buy food for someone whose bank account was frozen. Like you're creating a health problem here. like this isn't just about money. So someone coming back to the country has to pay $2,000 to $4,000. Yeah. I mean, it's on the triage of injury of issues. I'm thinking, okay, well, fine. Eventually we get to them, but right now we got to deal with vaccine injuries. We got to deal with folks who can't get jobs still, weren't getting EI. Like it's just triage.
Yeah, and even there's federal government employees that were having trouble. I ran into a couple of them during the POEC where they weren't being paid. They were having trouble because they wouldn't take that drug. A lot of people fell behind, lost their apartments, lost their homes. Some people lost marriages. There's a lot of things that really happened when all that pressure on your payroll started to happen during that time.
Right.
And I think for years we're going to be rebuilding or recovering from that. And some people won't. Some people left us. That's actually taken us to the next part of this conversation. Maids.
Right. So now after the government screws everyone over, they start offering them this new product, form of care. Yeah, sorry.
No, I wanted to hear that anger because I have the exact same anger, because I am shocked that we even have this, and I'm shocked that it's expanding, and I'm shocked that we have to have conversations like mature minors, mental illness, dementia. Like, really?
So here, okay, well, I'll ask you because I get asked. Well, so you're basically pro-suffering.
No.
Are you pro-suffering?
We have hospice care. We have lots of different ways that we've been doing for years to deal with end of life. We've been doing this since the beginning of time. Certainly not pro-suffering. I have a brother, I can take you to the story, hit by a car. What was the score called? There's something Glasgow score, GCG score. There's a score. He was 3, which is the bottom of it. It's the absolute worst score to have. And he was 17. So no, I'm very familiar with end-of-life care, hospice care, watching someone suffer because they're still alive and naturally their body is strong, but everything else is gone. So no, I'm very sensitive to the subject. But that's a common response to people is, so you're for suffering. What did we have before maids? We had hospice care, we had drugs, we had ways to take care of people. But I think this subject has gone even further than that. Because now other people are getting it, and I want to have that kind of conversation. Mature minors is one of them. Mental illness is another one. Dementia is another one. Because why is dementia patient suffering?
Right. So by way of a background, my mom made a career in palliative care. Okay. She wrote a book. What's that? Yeah, she wrote a book on it. I try to pawn it off on my followers, but nobody seems to be as interested in this. It's called Life After Death. She got a Senate medal for it, and for her whole career. So basically, her job was just to tend to people with end of life care, right? So she was first. She was a front runner in terms of dealing with seeing, right up close to my end. So how to what you can provide for someone in that situation. There is pain management that you can offer. She brought the family pet to the hospital. To comfort, songs, sing, like choirs. There's so much they would do. It changes humanity when you have the mindset of, that there are people that need to live, and that your voice, your hand can extend someone's life by a day or two. That being said, a lot of us big talkers like, what do why am I not on front line with people that could probably use a laugh for 5 minutes? Maybe that'll help. So there's a bit of a guilt that I, personally, I feel like if I'm really put my money where my mouth is, or my time where my mouth is. But I feel like it is the front, right? It is the pressing issue of our time, because there's a lot we could be doing in terms of system design, so that there's better funding, so that that the ones who are like depressed and choosing MAID, no, we can design systems better so that you're in if it's a social isolation, that can be addressed. Simple changes that just. But the reality is that it's expensive to care for seniors, right? I think that the budget office put out the report. I was going to share it. I think it was in one of the articles talking about how much it saves by eliminating one senior citizen from ongoing care. It's like $150,000 a person per year, I think. So that number, I think, you're looking at that's for someone in public health who's unclear on the morals, and then there's that number. Well, okay, we can use that number to create new drugs and make people's quality of life better and extend life in other situations. So I think there's that kind of twisted reasoning going on. But I don't know what to tell you. What the shocking part too is the whole way this got passed through the legislature is also kind of shocking, because everyone's saying, oh well, it's a charter right. It was the Supreme Court of Canada that clearly said that there's a charter right to die. If you look at the history, of that case of the Supreme Court,
I didn't read that part of the charter, by the way.
Right. Well, it's what was it under? Life, liberty, and security of the person, I think. So security of the person means if someone ordinarily has the ability to do something to their body, and they they no longer have that ability, they shouldn't be deprived of that ability just because they happen to be in a bad physical state. They should always, and so appoint an agent to do that deed for the person. So, but that's
is suicide still on the books as illegal?
That's a good question.
Because it was at one point, that was the one law that you can commit that you can't be convicted for.
I think that was what was the ruling on that? Anyhow,
because it should come off the books now if MAIDS is a program,
right? But point is that Supreme Court of Canada case was not as permissive as the legislature ended up taking it. Like, so what happened was Lametti ended up relying on a Quebec decision, a lower court decision that expanded the Supreme Court of Canada's decision. They didn't appeal it. They could have easily appealed the decision, but they didn't. And that's where it expanded it to, I think, people with mental issues. And I think they're using it also now expand further to minors, mature minors. So I don't know what to tell you. I think if, unless someone brings it to the Supreme Court of Canada, and I'm not sure on what basis the Supreme Court could even strike it down at this point, right? Like, what would be the grounds for striking it down? I can't even.
Parent bringing something forward because their mature minor went through the process and one parent didn't agree. Something along those lines.
That'd be a good. Yeah, the mature minor. Okay, maybe that case.
Yeah, because you can argue you had the rights as a parent to keep your kid alive. Another one chose differently. What do you do now?
Yep.
Because that's one bothering me, because it's going to be. Look, I'm an empathetic, sympathetic, and reasonable person. So the original conversations way back when, for the purpose of MAIDS, you can tug on my heartstring a little bit for that one. Mm-hmm. The expansion of it and how it's really changing into. You're hearing reports, and by the way, there's a bit of a false rumor, but people are applying because of economic reasons, so they're poor. I know there was headlines where they're saying Canadians execute their poor. That's not true. There was somebody who applied who also had mental illness, and that's why the application was looked at, but they never got it approved. So we don't do that. We don't actually allow MAIDS for economic reasons. Has that changed? Are you aware of any case where somebody was successfully received MAIDS purely for economic reasons?
I've only heard a case in the media. No, I haven't.
That case in the media it was false information. So that one was in not Etobicoke, Markham or something in that area, and it was a mentally disabled person who was applying under that reason, not economic.
I mean, look, there's been too many people via Twitter that have reached out to me saying that this liberal doling out of offering MAID, like that's just to me is proof. That's enough proof that this thing is not working. As soon as you start offering it to anyone on an unsolicited basis, to me that we've got to go back to the drawing board and stop the whole program. That should never be. You never offer that to anybody.
Well, what year was it? It was 10,000. So not last year, not 2022, but 2021. The numbers came out for 2021, and it was 10,000 people that used MAIDs and growing. And during that same year, there was 2,000 people who took their own lives. So the government is doing roughly 80% of the end-of-life care for people while they're handling the other 20% themselves.
Yeah, I'm scared. They're supposed to release the numbers. July is the month that they're supposed to.
Yeah, I don't know the numbers for 2022 yet.
They're delayed. So either, I don't know.
I'm waiting for them because I'm sure they're higher than what they were last year.
Everything's delayed now, but my concern is that this could be shocking. But anyhow, we'll see. But yeah, look, I'm seeing your comments. Yeah, there are people like at the end where you really get the flavor that they want to end their suffering. And so, yeah, if they're dying, if they literally have to die of thirst or die of hunger, that's the only way to put them out of their misery, is to starve them. Yeah, that's a bit of a problem. I don't know what the solution there is.
Yeah, so that's what my brother went through. So his body was so strong because he was young. He was 17 when he had his accident, hit by a car. And he didn't pass away till 23. So those 6 years was a deterioration.
And pain management. So I don't even know, like medically, pain management. So if a person just has a button where they can just keep administering medication to themselves, right, and choose their own dose of pain medication, I would have thought like as a workaround, right? At least that way they have control over it, right? They can control either how much pain they want, or if they, the workaround towards them wanting to take it all the way. But the idea of a doctor injecting someone with a poison of lethal dose, to me, there's no reconciliation for that as ever acceptable under any circumstances. I think the U.S. workaround is the physician will crush the medication and leave it beside the patient, and the patient is ultimately the one that does the actual actus reus of right.
But Kevorkian tried that. Remember, Kevorkian gave them the button, and that was the way that he said, I'm not liable. I just set up the machine. They push the button.
Right. And that to me is, it's one step less removed than it's still bad. But if you're gonna dance with the devil, at least that way you're not turning directly, because once the doctor or the healthcare worker touches the patient and actually is the one physically responsible, it's a different level. I think in common law, and under general recognized law, that the level of causality is somewhat more lenient in that case. Right, when you put this intervening cause in between them. But the reality is that, and I keep posting this on Twitter, you just got to look at the international community. Like, what Canada is doing is not accepted. It's just not recognized. And I'm trying to tell doctors, like, just because you're doing it here, you're getting away with it. If you're known internationally as a doctor that's doing this, you could have problems if you're traveling to certain countries that don't have such a liberal approach to this. You know what I mean? If a king, an emperor, or a tyrant in another country hears that a doctor has been involved in MAID in Canada against their nationals, against foreign nationals that are in Canada, like that's they could be detained in a foreign country. It's a problem. You know what I mean?
Right. Because what's legal here, not necessarily legal anywhere else. And yeah, absolutely, you can get in trouble going to a country where your activity here is legal, but not there.
Right.
Yeah. Now, NIH, so National Institute of Health in the States, Dr. Fauci, he was the one that ran that. They did an analysis of mature minor MAIDs for a review. Mm-hmm. And their conclusion was crystal clear: life-affirming care. Life-affirming care. You don't give end-of-life care. The whole point in their whole analysis of the mature minors is, unless it's completely, this is the end for them, terminal, you're only a little bit. That's not what we're proposing here in Canada. We're proposing in Canada beyond that. It's not the same as what we originally started with. So their assessment was life-affirming care all the way to the end then it's available. What do you feel about expanding it to mental illness, dementia, and those other things? Now, mature minors was taken off the table for now, right? Or did that one pass? I know mental health was taken off the table in March.
Yeah, I think they're all on pause, but I think they're all still on the table. And
right. Okay. So wrong words here. So they're still being considered, but it's been paused because it was supposed to pass in March.
Pause, right? But I think they put it off a year, but I think it's still on the agenda. And I don't know, man. It's such a dicey topic, it seems. But I don't put it to a referendum at least. Like, let's get some more intel from the entire Canadian population. I don't think this would pass remotely with 51%. I think maybe you'd get 15% of people in favor of this. So that being the case, how are these 15% of people now driving an agenda of end of life type stuff for 100% of the population? Oh, okay, but everyone's choosing it. It's not being forced on anyone. Well, I don't know, man. For some of these patients that are not well, and they're going to say they have so many checks and balances in place that don't worry about it. Trust us, it's all good. I'm like, I've seen the COVID response. Trust but verify. I'm trusting, but I'll verify. So unless I bear witness to these, speak to these doctors and all these patients and the family members, I mean, I'm taking everything with a bit of a grain of salt. When the biggest proponents and the biggest lobbyists of this legislation, when they're sponsoring advertisements on Google, on my Google searches, like a sponsored link, like that's not. What are you sponsoring? Why? What's the financial reward that they have to sponsor and then make it known that this is an option? I mean, so that's a long rant to say, I think the threat is still looming in a year's time, and yeah, they want to expand it. And if there's an ethical uncertainty, they're going to err on the side of saving the budget because, like I say, it's not cheap to keep either seniors alive or to care for patients whose mental conditions are just not treatable. We've tried and nothing's working, so we're done. I'm like, no, you don't give up. That's why it's called life. You do not give up. And so if there are always modalities worth trying, and expand the ketamine program, to expand the psychedelics if that's showing promising signs for some folks, right? But
allow experimental.
All experimental.
Allow them, because at the end of life,
make it easier. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But that's not the direction. I think human nature is kind of wonky. Once you have the permit to do this kind of thing, you kind of stop dotting the I's and crossing the T's at a certain point, and you're just like, let's get on with the show, and the mind can justify all kinds of crazy stuff. So look,
for sure,
right? This guy has good organs. Okay. That he's not well. We've tried everything. We're going to save another life with this person's organs. Let's just do it. And then everyone's kind of like in the room, like, I don't know if that's the good well, we crossed our I's and dotted our T's, right? And that's where it's going. And that's where people are like, these are all good organs. And so this person's not happy. Let's just do them a favor, do the other person on the wait list a favor. And that's the kind of like, whoa, man, that's kind of my ticket out of Canada. Sorry, as much as I love Canada, that's my ticket out of here. I mean,
that's human harvesting. And your brother talked about that on Timcast, because in the East, New Brunswick or something like that, there's a now law in place where you have to opt out of.
Right. That. Oh, and right. Nova Scotia, right? You're automatically
Nova Scotia or New Brunswick. One of them, you're automatically on the list now. And that decision happens before death sometimes.
Right.
Whether or not it's a good time, he's not recovering, we're not going to get him back. Let's save the organs. Because for my brother, that decision was made by his father. It's not the same father as me, so he's my half brother, to keep him alive. And then when I found out from the doctors the severity of his injury, and now it's too late to be a donor, right? So he then had, I think, 5.5 years of just deterioration until gone. Now, I'm not saying I wish the decision was different. It wasn't my decision. That were horrific for the family. But I understand what you're talking about. But this law now in New Brunswick or Nova Scotia, maybe the check and let us know, does make that decision for you. So as the way your brother put it was, you're close enough to death, so they take your organs. That I don't like that. I think that's very scary. And if it starts at one province, things have a tendency to move across. I do want to answer your original question, even though it might have been a little rhetorical. How does the 15% get away with this? The same way you started this conversation by asking me if I care about people suffering. They make it emotionally attached, and they make it difficult to answer, and that's how they get through some of these resistors that would have normally resistance to this. When you make it that kind of question and you frame it in that kind of way, you almost have to be heartless to answer it. So maybe that's why a lot of people don't answer that question, and they concede when that question pops up.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, because the way the question is framed, it puts people on the spot in the wrong way, and that happens across the board in different issues, especially with the vaccines as well, right?
And gender for your children. Do you rather have a dead son or a live daughter? That's how
these
framed.
are legit. That's a tough question. If that's the only alternative, man, okay, I hear you.
Well, if you frame it that way, absolutely, it sounds horrible.
Right. But oftentimes it's shades of gray, and that's kind of where the conversation on Twitter and in politics gets in the House when they're debating these things. It's like, it's not, I guys aren't really helping the cause on either side here, right? So yeah, it's tough. It's tough. Would you?
But that's why we went into law, right? This is why we went into law, because we actually have an attraction to the difficult questions. You can't go into law and be afraid of answering hard questions, could you?
Yeah, that's a tough one because you have to have a line in the sand somewhere with this stuff. Like, right? If you don't have the line, well, okay, what kind of killing? I guess you always have that exception, but like in times of war, like who becomes a legitimate target? What is considered wartime that these, certain killings are justified? When are they not? Like, yeah, I guess these gray areas are like, but I feel like sometimes the debate then allows people, okay, while you guys are debating this, we're going to start killing 20,000 people a year, and we'll figure it out. Like, no, stop So I don't know how you resolve these things with 40 million people, get them all on the same page.
Yeah, what's interesting is we have a government that encourages end of life for seniors, and then when the vaccine comes around, let's save the seniors. Pick a lane.
Right.
Like, do you really care about seniors? Because I do too. I agree with that. Do we care about seniors? Well, then let's stop giving them AIDS. Oh, no. Don't take that away. Okay. Do we really care about seniors then? Because you're saying all of us young people should be injected to save the seniors. Now, all of a sudden, they're your top priority, but yet you still have maids sitting right there for them.
Right. And again, the way they're characterizing maids, it's not maids. You keep calling it maids. It's called end of life care. It's a form of care. And so medical care. And so if you're depriving someone of care, I don't care what your religion, I don't care what your beliefs are. If you're depriving someone of care, the CPSO is going to come after you. So meaning if you don't provide an effective referral, if you don't want to get involved in the whole maid business, fine. But you have to provide an effective referral, in good faith. So if you don't, but if you say, I don't even want to get involved in that, well, now the CPSO is going to come after you. They're going to start taking away doctors' licenses who aren't sipping the Kool-Aid and providing referrals because on the basis of not providing care. That's where this is going. I don't know if that's the official policy by the CPSO on this. I'm trying to get an audience with the CPSO, but they are literally locking the doors on me because they are apparently scared of dealing with the public. So
identify as a female, and they might open the door for you.
No, they've closed it to everyone, the entire public. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's no way to unless someone has the resources to start an application against the CPSO. There's no way to at this point.
Okay. Now, is there any way to put this genie back in the bottle? Is there any future that you can see where we unwind this and put it back? Conservative government 10 times over. Like, is there a way to, or now that it's out?
It is. It's the old Canadian way. The Canadian way, it's a game of inches. You take 1 inch at a time. That's what they've done on the way in. That's what you do on the way out. So it's like the King's marching soldiers. How do they get back the streets? 1 inch at a time, one step at a time. So same thing with MAID. Yeah, you can't pull the plug. Well, maybe you could pull the plug immediately, but that would create
unintended.
Oh yeah. Too soon. Is there a way to make it more expensive, to not cover it? Because the risk of turning all healthcare workers into accidental murderers if they didn't. Oh crap! You pulled the legislation. I didn't know.
Right.
So I don't know how that would work. You're right. You'd have to pull. You have to do it slowly.
I have a small solution, possibly.
Talk to me.
First, the federal government should stop dictating healthcare straight to the province, and then province choice. So, just like in the States now, after the abortion change on the Supreme Court, it's state choice. And I'd like to see Alberta put a moratorium on it. If you want to do that, head over to Ontario, maybe, but you won't be getting it here in Alberta. And then maybe other provinces might take that kind of lead, for example. I'd like to see something along those lines. Maybe tackle late-term abortion, some subject where 80% support is on it. But disconnect from the federal government and have province choice on some of these issues. What do you think about that?
I normally would have thought that would be effective, but the problems I'm seeing in Ontario are not driven directly by the federal government. It's more like alliances where policymakers are indirectly funded or steered by federal sources. But I'm saying even at the provincial level, we have problems where the policymakers are not going to be aligned with removing MAID so fast unless the voters come out and send them a clear sign. And, what politicians aren't going to want to touch it if it's going to kick them out of office, and nor should they necessarily, right? Like if they take a hard stance on MAID and then that gets them ejected from office, well, I think we're back to square one. So
that's always the problem, right? You're not effective if you're not in there, and you want to try and stay in there so you can be effective.
But hold on, but Jason, the whole point here is that the crime here, murder, is federal jurisdiction. You can't avoid that. So
criminal code, correct? Yeah.
So this is a criminal code issue. This is not a province issue necessarily with MAID in terms of why MAID is allowed.
Well, I like where you're going with that, because now you're saying we didn't vitiate the criminal code for murder, so we still have murder on the books. So are we? But
that's all where MAID. That's all where MAID falls under. It's under the murder. I think it's under the homicide provisions of the criminal code. Like it's okay, killing someone's illegal except for if you qualify under the following guideline.
So MAID's created an exception under the criminal code then.
That's how it's legislated. So it's otherwise murder, but it's exempted under 415 sub 6 or whatever, or sub 2. Like it's an exemption under the murder law. It's like we're killing someone is murder, intentionally killing someone is murder, except for if you get them to sign off on healthcare forms and do this, that, and the other. So
now what's a technical, or is it just no penalty, or like is it still murder, just no penalty, or we're not calling it murder, we're just calling it something else?
No, it's not. I think I forget how it's like culpable homicide is such and such, except if it's done in the following.
So it's a straight up exception then.
Yeah,
exactly. It's not called murder anymore. It's just called not murder.
It's an exemption to culpable homicide. I think that's the way they framed it. Someone can double check me on that. I think that's how it's generally done, which is why it's so weird, because you're right. If you just next year, okay, conservatives come into power, we're taking that exemption away. Okay, quick, everybody, make a PSA, make sure everyone knows about this. Murder is no longer legal. That's a really weird conversation, really weird.
Okay,
PSA.
well, actually, I think we might still be good then. So there's no rule on the federal level, not Health Canada, not criminal code. There's no rule that says you have to provide MAID service, right?
Well, this is now you're getting into the whole provincial /
correct,
CPSO.
Because at that point, maybe the province can say, well, that's a service we just don't have. We don't offer.
Oh, I see. Right.
Because there's no rule that says you have to provide MAID.
But then you're getting into the laneway MAID service providers, right? You're going to have.
Well, I wouldn't mind that. I wouldn't mind Alberta saying you can't have it here, but you'd have to go to Ontario, because that's what happens in the States. For some places, if you want an abortion, you can travel. You can do a traveling abortion. You can do traveling MAIDs. Right. And then before Canada even had it, people were traveling to Europe to get MAIDs done.
Right. And then that creates a different such a set of social problems, which is that, then the rich are going to be able to kill themselves more easily than those who can't afford to travel, right? But maybe that's, I don't know, maybe that's not going to be, maybe that's more palatable than, the way the states have done it for abortion, right? Where it's really harming, folks who can't afford to travel to different states. So I don't know.
Yeah, you bring up a good point there, because I'm not a fan of economic class becoming a decider when it comes to anything with law.
Right.
Never been a fan of that.
Right. And that's why it's a complicated, what do you call it? What's the system? What's it called? The Rubik's?
The Rubik's, or?
Yeah, where you change the system and the whole thing spirals. I forget it. But
the chat will get it to us.
Yeah. Anti-Maders. Yeah, man. Somebody came after me for my anti-Maid promotion on my Twitter handle. Like, oh, this guy supports suffering. I'm like, oh my gracious, is that how you guys are framing it now?
Yeah.
I'm a suffering supporter of suffering. I'm like, no, that's not how you frame anti-Maid. Anti-Maid
just tell him it's your mother's sister who cleans. I don't know what you're talking about. It's my anti-Maid.
Anti-Maid.
No, but no, that's absolutely, and they're going to frame it that way all the time.
Right.
And eventually, there's going to be some child or something like that we all are empathetic for, like just horrible suffering, and they're going to put a picture to it, and they're going to be saying, you remember Sandy, like whatever the name is, you want another Sandy, going to be something like that will also come down the pipe. And that is how evil, I don't want to bring this up, but that's how evil minds work. They try to go after your God-fearing or loving mind. I do care about suffering. Wow, that's a way to frame that question. But I think, intelligence, conversation, and sticking to your convictions still works. And you can have those conversations. Now, I want to throw something out there really off topic, but we're coming to an end here. So I kind of want to throw it out there as an idea for you, because I'm a huge advocate for removing economic class from the legal system. We currently have set fines. That's an economic class thing. Set fines. So one guy who's rich, speeding ticket means nothing to him. Another guy could ruin his entire day, could ruin his entire week. I actually had a client when I was a paralegal who got a no insurance ticket. Happens. Okay. No insurance tickets happen. People who are doing that can't really afford the insurance. That's kind of what got them into that situation to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
And then the no insurance ticket comes with a set fine of $4,000. So, boy, you're ensuring that person ain't driving for quite some time now. Then there's the economic impact of that person. Can't go to work. Got to get someone to drive them. Can't do this. In fact, what actually happened, without naming names, they continue to drive without insurance so they can work. Other places around this world, they don't have set fines. They have fines related to income.
Right.
So 1 day's worth of wages for speeding, 5 days worth of wages for no insurance. It's based on your economic input, not based on a set fine. I find that far more fair, because that rich guy will also have consequences that will hurt. A whole day's wage for him could be $50,000. That would hurt. What do you think about that? Because I know some places in Europe do that. They do fine you based on your income. And I think the world's largest fine yet is some multi-millionaire or multi-billionaire speeding.
Right.
Because after they did the math, it was a large fine. That stung him. I assure you he won't do that again. But, the guy who doesn't have a lot of money, a day's wage, then get back to work. Like, it's not about collecting money from people. It's about teaching a lesson and rehabilitating and maybe discouraging or getting people to kind of do the right thing. But my client, who really wanted to do the right thing, couldn't afford it, and then certainly couldn't afford it after the fine, lost his license, and now drives without a license and drives without insurance, which is no good for anybody on the road. What do you think about that kind of idea, where they're not set fines, they're income based, like some other places around the world?
Well, it's funny. We kind of already have that. It's not perfect. I don't know how fines work in the insurance. Is it a statutory minimum, like non-negotiable? The Justice of the Peace has no discretion whatsoever?
Well, the Justice of the Peace can do whatever they want, because I actually had one client who was rich, and the judge brought it down to $1,500. One client who was not rich, $4,000, from $5,000 down to $4,000. So the set fine is $5,000, and then the judge can bring it down from there.
I was going to say that seems to be the way that the courts at least, in Ontario, Canada, can kind of address this issue is the, they see the ideally, or not ideally, but, practically they see that a person is having issue paying the ticket. Either they need more time or, or it's just reduced to accommodate for that. Yeah, I think it makes sense. It definitely, I don't really see the downside. The whole point of a fixed, right?
Well, the downside is you have to disclose your income for the fine to be set. That is a downside, and that could be a privacy issue for a lot of people. But your last tax return is what they do on the other countries. So they don't even ask you; they just go in your last tax return and do the math.
I see, and then that becomes public. Yeah, that's fair. That's an interesting dilemma because, right, then you're in court.
Yeah, because your fine is like $12,000, and people do the math like, okay, well, we know how much money you have now. Like there is that issue. I get it, and that could be resolved by, well, you don't disclose the amount. The amount is private in the system. The ticket is assigned a number. You don't actually see the amount. Something along those lines. But I've personally witnessed rich people have no problem. They paid my bill. They pay that bill, and away they go. Irresponsible driver. It's not rich people losing their license, can't work, having real big impacts.
No, right. It just makes things even worse. It just you're not really solving the problem. You're going to create a whole host of other social problems.
And then you don't pay the bill, you lose your license, drive without license, you get caught with that, criminal offenses now, and before you know it, what started off as just an economic issue turns into criminal on you, simply because you couldn't afford things. I wasn't a fan of that when I watched that happen.
In BC, you have to get insurance for the uninsured. Yeah, I think you have to do that here. I think you still have coverage.
Yes, number 5. My wife is in insurance. There's an option that you buy that if the other guy's not insured, you're covered. Like option 5 or something like that.
Meanwhile, I just remember in law school, BC was the one that came out the hardest with the uninsured driver. That was the Supreme Court of Canada, where I think the case was the person didn't get notice that their insurance was expiring, and so they just forgot or they didn't have it, And so there was like a statutory minimum of something ridiculous. I think even jail time. And so that was the case where I forget whether it violated, whether that law was so strict and so it failed to provide any defense whatsoever. It basically was ruled unconstitutional because it came down so hard on the person. But I think it basically stripped them of a defense was one issue.
A defense when liberty is involved? Yeah, I can see why it's unconstitutional.
Right. The defense, and I don't even know if the quantum also exceeded. I think there might be a certain quantum that's, but yes, I think the main issue is the defense. Point being is, I think these systemic issues can be better managed. I think now everyone's kind of has their eyes on these issues. So, right, with part of the global reset, we're reevaluating how everything.
I hate that word.
You know what? I like it. I like it, provided as part of the global reset, everyone has to retake their oath of allegiance or whatever it is, whatever oath they took as in their country of that they're living in. Because I think a lot of people,
and should we now have some sort of test for voting?
Test for voting? I don't know. That's dicey.
Do you know enough to vote? A lot of people are asking for that.
Is there? Yeah, that's a whole other can of worms.
Yeah, no, well, there's digital voting, digital ID, digital currency, like a bunch of stuff coming down.
You got to vote with your heart. That's all you need. So no, there should be no test. Just vote with your heart.
No problem. Stop picking colors. Vote to the candidate. Learn your candidate. Understand who you're voting for. That might help when you're getting representation.
Right.
Now, are there any other problems? I'm about to take you to the questions. There's some questions in the question folder here.
Oh, that's
but there are
any other what?
Yeah, for sure. Are there any other problems in the legal system, like identified here with the income-based fines instead of set fines? Anything else that you might want to point to that might need some fixing that you've identified?
No, I think I raised it already, which was my my frustration at the inability to for litigants who need it and want it to have in-person hearings. I've raised this with so many different institutions, and it's falling on deaf ears. I raised it with the Canadian Bar Association. I've raised it with different organizations, TDSB. A lot of folks are trying to get away with putting things on Zoom, and it's like it can be prejudicial. So I'm going to say use Zoom in the legal profession. Use Zoom carefully. Proceed with caution. And if somebody's demanding an in-person respect it, because we're humans, and humans by default deserve to be treated with dignity, and that involves in-person meetings if it's necessary and if it's being sought.
There's a certain connection you can't get unless it's in person.
Yep.
And it's even with your litigator, with the other litigator, with the other party, and the judge, even the court clerks. All of that kind of matters.
I think Hillier was complaining because his case got moved entirely without.
Okay, we may have lost it for a second. Hillier, Randy.
His moved to Zoom when it was supposed to be in person, and he was not happy, rightfully so. So,
well, I was talking to him yesterday. He didn't complain about that. He had other things to complain about, but not that.
I'm sure it's on his list. I'm sure like item 30 or 40 down the list of grievances he has. So that's, you got some good, man, you got some good talent. Not just me. You have other, heavy hitters.
Oh, for sure. You're the heaviest for sure. But, Maxim Bernier, and I have some others on here, but you're the heaviest so far. Your brother.
Paul, what's his name? He got, what are the big doctors?
Paul Weston something? The guy from Nova Scotia?
No. The doctor who's coming on your show.
Peter McCullough.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep. He's coming up. Yeah, Chris Barber at the end of this week. Even Greg Hill, who's a pilot. He's done some really good work around this stuff. So, God bless. I've been getting lots of yeses. So I'll keep doing that. I've also got some no's. You just don't see them. The list of no's a little bit longer. You don't see them because they don't say yes. And I'm also working on a little hint for my crowd. One of the previous prime ministers will be speaking possibly to one of the previous prime ministers at one point. I won't tell you which one.
Okay. I can only imagine.
She's really nice.
Okay. Okay, I was sure it was.
We only have one previous prime minister of that gender.
Oh, okay, Peckford. I was thinking of. Okay, never mind. I'm about to.
No, Peckford's a premier.
Yes.
So not quite the PM. Maybe we'll get there.
Good stuff.
But Peckford is on the list. He's just very busy right now.
Well, hopefully, hopefully in the future you'll have a former Prime Minister Trudeau on your show.
Okay, so listen, I am doing the POEC list, all witnesses. That's what I'm working my way through this year. This is why Chris Barber and Tom Marazzo and Jeremy McKenzie and other people like that have been on, because they were all witnesses during the POEC. Yeah, he was number 76. So
that'd be cool.
I was just joking. I was just joking earlier today with one gentleman. I won't name him, but he's also one of the POEC witnesses. I was just joking with him today, and I said, "Hey," he goes, "Do you want me to get anybody else?" I'm like, "Well, you can get me anybody on the POEC list, but can you get JT?" And he laughs, la la la. I'm like, "Good luck with that one." I said, "Well, I now know how to get on the visitor list for the criminal correctional centers here in Alberta, because I'm dealing with the Coots men, so I get to go see them. So all I have to do is call ahead and get my name on the list when he's in there." And the buddy laughed. He goes, "Maybe one day."
That's awesome.
But that might be how I interview him in the remand center in Alberta, because I believe he should have 533 days of remand to think about what he's done. Off topic there, but yeah, thank you very much. I have been getting a lot of good guests and a lot of people saying yes, and I was very happy that you did. Because I really wanted to talk to you. You did the stuff during Windsor with your brother. You have an advocate, and I also saw the anti-maids thing, and that didn't scare me away. That attracted me. So nice. I do really appreciate. Yeah, I do really appreciate that you put that out there, and that's your position. There's only 2 questions here, and
good.
I'm going to try and make sure that you're not telling them this is legal advice. So this is not legal advice. This is maybe just an opinion at best for the situation. So, family member ununionized, was fired after 30 years of employment for not attesting to vaccine status. Is there a specific law within the Emergency Act or Canada Labor Code that requires this? I think it was Quarantine Act maybe that you might be looking at for this.
Family member unionized was fired. Okay, that's your key word right there is unionized. Was fired after 30 years of employment for not getting testing. Right?
Not testing.
So I was with this gentleman, Andre Givogue, who's taken, who was it? Fisheries, I think he's with. He went to the federal court on this for not attesting. Is there a specific law within the Emergency Act or Canada Labor Code that requires?
I don't think Emergency Act would apply.
No, not Emergency Act. Canada Labor Code.
Quarantine maybe.
Yeah, but the point is you got to take it with your union, and the issue with the union is that they sometimes are they'll hear it, but they won't really go to bat for you on this type of thing. And then so your claim is made more difficult because you have to then fight the union's decision not to take the case on for you. So you're dealing with a duty of fair representation issue.
Right.
So, but for not attesting to vaccines, the key is to really dig into that vaccine policy of whatever employer this was. It doesn't say if it was probably federally regulated one, but you got to dig into that vaccine policy, because where there have been some success is showing that the employer didn't even follow their own policy properly. And so if you can show that, and then the union's just like, nah, we're not into it, then you can, okay, well then you can, it's next level. But main thing is limitations period, just being mindful of that, like get legal advice, because all these things are pretty much, the window's closing 2 years, generally speaking, on these things. So that was,
that's Ontario that has statutes.
Ontario, right? Sorry. So depending on where, but
not every province has that.
Right. Good point. But either way, you want to get on sooner, generally speaking, rather than later. Although, as more data comes out, with vaccine safety and all the like, it's I'm finding there is some advantage in having waited a bit now to bring claims. Because now it's like, oh, you really supported this? Like, you're okay with this, and this? And it's like, okay, not really. And they're more likely to, be reasonable in maybe settling before trial. So that's that.
Yeah, and there's always the option in the future that if this becomes an issue that should be reopened, like for example, in New York State, they put a moratorium on that said, okay, we have a statute of limitations on sexual assault, but we're going to actually drop that for a year, go ahead and report like crazy for a year and bring them all forward. They did that in New York State and California, I believe. So in the future, Canada could say, well, all these things that expired, statute limited, Ontario, all that kind of stuff, you can reopen these now because under this particular decision, we figured out, we acted too hastily. The real information came out 3 years later. Now you guys can go ahead and address it. That's a pie in the sky. Gosh, Canada isn't a history of doing stuff like that. But that door is there. That is something that could happen in the future if new information came out past the statute of limitation date. There could be a decision that opens up that door. It'd be tough, but it's possible.
I think if there'll be some legal successes, but I think the big success coming down the pipes is going to be political. I think I'm hoping people are going to want to see some, rectification, compensation, some dealing with the reality of the mistakes that were done. Whether it was great to see the Army, the CAF, that the what do you call it, the tribunal there that come out with the Section 7 analysis. That was
right. What's the result of that? I was waiting for that.
That was the grievance member ruled against the Army. They said it was an unjustifiable violation of Section 7.
Ruled against the Army, so that good. So they got it
against the chief. Yeah, I don't think there was a remedy. I think it was just a declaration that and a suggestion that the Chief of Defense may want to apologize for having violated thousands of people's chart Section 7. But
I think the remedy is they're going to change some of the statuses on why they were kicked out, and that will get them back into veteran payments and stuff like that.
I would hope so.
It depends how you're kicked out. Yeah. I was speaking to a gentleman on this topic, Alex Cabana. So he's a veteran who was part of that lawsuit because he was affected by it. And I'm glad to hear that they won.
Yeah,
and I know it wasn't a monetary thing. It was to change the status of a lot of people who were discharged under the wrong status, and if you're under the wrong status, you don't get any payments or anything like that.
And in the U.S., the Congress couldn't, the Senate couldn't pass the law on that. They got shot down 46 to 53 on it. Right? They wanted to pass a law that would compensate. Yeah.
So it's the Democrats voted against it then.
All the Democrats and then 3 Republicans switched over. Crazy.
Wow. That's insane.
Right?
Okay.
But so I'm so glad. So you're right. The Section 7. I don't know if that'll play out. That means that they're in all these vets or now vets that were kicked out of the Army. Maybe they'll now have to be entitled. They'll be entitled to things that they weren't. I don't know.
Right, entitlements. Yeah. Because some of them lost it based off of that decision, and that was wrong. They went and go and serve for us, and then they make a decision to keep themselves healthy, and then they're being punished.
Well, and that's it. And people in the Army, you're not in the Army for the money. They're not in it for the money. They're in it for the honor and the pride. You know what I mean? And so to have that Section 7 ruling in their favor, that's like, to me, that's, I mean, it's obviously money's important for, but that's your honor. You got it all back with that, I feel. So anyhow.
That could be a good sign of things to come then.
That's right.
So
exactly.
That came out of the Supreme Court, right?
That was the grievance. I forget what they call it. It's like an internal review of within the army. So
okay.
Nina,
it wasn't
Freiheit,
in our
I think
courts.
was her name. It was a tribunal member, like some bold friggin',
I'm gonna have to reach out to Alex and see if he's happy about that one. And Alex, sometimes he's in my chat.
Oh yeah,
so
ask him. I'd be very interested.
Yeah. I have one more question here, and then we can maybe wrap up and let you get back to your billable hours.
Yes.
I use that system too. You want to put billable in there. Lawyers are very expensive, of course, and not always, by the way. That's a bit of a stereotype. Sometimes they're very affordable. Are there teams of volunteer lawyers who can take on these cases pro bono? Ooh.
Yeah, I mean, it depends where you are. This is a dicey topic because they're grifting. The lawyers are grifting. If I hear that again, man.
Jim Machindo, where are you? Paj, can you
Machado.
find out which province is this person in? Because if they're in Ontario, they have paralegals as an option. If they're not in Ontario, they don't.
Yeah, if you can, like people, I mean, there's legal aid for if the persons really can't qualify for any help. But no, my recommendation is if you can't afford it, you're going to have to do a crash course and get up to speed and start self-representing. It can be done; it's work, but otherwise, that's just the cost of doing business. I mean, there's lawyers that'll go, if you're lucky, you could find one that is either starting, willing to take it on or whatever. In Ontario, there's the Law Society Referral Service that can connect potential clients with, with lawyers that are able to help. What else? There's
not much. You have advocacy groups.
The advocate, right? The Law Societies now have certified these new entities called civil societies. Very ironically titled because I do feel like they're the only organizations holding up civil society these days. They are basically nonprofits that are able to act as lawyers. So JCC, it's funded by the JCCF. It's called the Advocates. I forget what it's called. If you go to the Law Society, Civil Society's website, they have a list of all of them. So JCCF funds one of them, and then the Democracy Fund is another one. Those are my two go-tos for almost quasi-free legal assistance. Meaning they need stories to carry them. You know what I mean? So the better the story, the easier. Then they could sell it and they could market themselves and to raise money publicly for their work because they rely on the public purse. So that's my recommendation. Either
it's a tough one.
Yeah, learn the ropes and you can do it, or reach out to the civil societies.
Yeah, and that's kind of my story. So I went to Trios College in Brampton, 38. And then I had my paralegal license. I wrote the exam on my 40th birthday. My main motivator behind that wasn't to change professions. It was because I had a successful career in software, and I had lots of people come out of the woodwork to cause headaches for me for no reason other than opportunist advantage for them. And I found my legal bills were getting high. So this was a way to teach myself. Since then, I've been able to handle it. I basically mostly do self-represented stuff, but I have helped other people as an actual practicing paralegal. But my motivator was to learn this at this stage of my life so that going forward, I have enough to take care of myself. Not for everybody, because that required a good year and a half of dedication to get her done. But, to those that may have a little desire to get in it, paralegal is attainable. You can do that in under 2 years if you really want to, and then you can make a career out of it. But do you think maybe there's room for some sort of training for self-represented, maybe help them push a button, spit out a form here, ask some questions?
There is so much.
Now we're going to get into the AI conversation because this is where AI law is headed. This is exactly
right. AI is good. With a bit of grain of salt, I do like the whole the Chat GPT with what it can do, but you have to be very careful.
Now you've heard the stories already. So Chat GPT 3, where some lawyer would put something in, pass it to the judge, and they're not case law. Those are not even real. It's just making stuff up.
You've got to verify, but generally it knows how to put something together pretty quickly.
Well, ChatGPT 4 got much better. 3, it just made things up. 4, it actually uses real case law.
That's good. Real case law.
I've tested that because that was one of my first things I did with the ChatGPT 4. I'm like, hey, look, can you write me a motion to dismiss based on these grounds? And
there's so many free. I don't mean to write myself into some clients here, but there are so many free, and I don't even. Somebody's got to go and scrounge the thing, but or free or low cost, and educational platforms. Like there's so many people doing this. I just don't know who's centralizing all this information. It'd be good to know. I know Eva what's her name?
Chipowich.
Eva Chipowich. She's putting together, I think, some platform similar to that. Forum Canadians. I think that's more general. But yeah, and I know someone actually in the GTA who had a free precedent and a free, almost like hand-holding service. I forget the name of it. You got to do a lot of digging and you'll find stuff. It's just like I say, it's a second job it's a second full-time job. So,
well, the first 40 years of my life was software developer, back-end cloud, infrastructure, AI, all of that. Now I have law, and I also have a desire to help people get access to law. And this could be one of those mechanisms. Now, I'm very terrified that AI is going to be too relied upon to make decisions, because I still believe the court should have justice and you should be able to case by case argue. But for simple things to get you started, at least for self-represented, I think there's an opportunity there to assist people.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. It's just the incentive. What's like everyone's profit, right? Like, so what's the incentive? Who's going to pay for it? Who's going to fund it? Like, what's the profit? What's the, that's the challenge. And so when the federal and provincial governments are taxing everyone to death, it's hard to raise money and to divert money to these cool, tactical concepts.
Yeah, you have to learn how to monetize in different ways. For example, Uber, not many people know this, but Uber is not a car hailing service. They're not. They're just in a phase right now of being that. They are an autonomous driver service. They do plan to get rid of all drivers. They've been using drivers to be guinea pigs to teach them how to GPS and drive cars. This whole phase of Uber has been to teach the Uber AI how to drive cars. So, and you have to do that.
Where'd you get this from?
It's common knowledge in the tech world. They're buying 10,000 Mercedes AIs.
Yeah, no, it's true. They are doing a big push towards autonomous. So it's hard to argue.
Yeah, and this is where they got the data from. Tesla, same thing. Tesla made self-driving very inexpensive and put it everywhere for the purpose of building up the database in order to have the best performing car.
Dang.
And eventually Teslas are going to be rentable. You won't own them. They're just going to be as you need to drive, then they show up. And that's going to be where they're headed with that. It's common knowledge in the tech world, maybe not in the legal world. But that's an example of how you will do a service and you don't realize that they're actually using you to develop the next version of that service, which is completely autonomous.
Yep.
The drivers don't even know that. They're participating in their own unemployment.
Wow.
It's true.
Well, that's what it is.
It is what it is. Welcome to that world. We got other problems than Uber drivers, autonomous. Exactly. We got globalists. We've got vaccine. We've got who knows what else is coming down the pipe. We got big ones.
Yep. A trial for people that have been in jail for 550 days. So let's get on with it.
Yeah. So you know a little bit about the coups. I'm not going to drill you on it because it's some stuff behind the scenes I've chatted with you about, but maybe you know enough to make a comment on it at this point.
Other than get a trial, man. Mandatory trials within 90 days. That's my put that on a t-shirt.
We cracked the innocent until proven guilty thing. So we figured it out. There's a piece of the sentence that comes before that line that people forget about. The government is innocent until proven guilty. That's the system we have right now. Do you understand what I mean there?
Yeah, that's an interesting
way to put it. So when they file charges, the assumption is they're not lying. From that point on, the hard work is to challenge that allegation and see if it will hold up. So innocent until proven guilty on the government. And that's why we have to defend ourselves.
His Majesty. It's His Majesty. His Majesty's perfect. We're still a model.
Apparently so.
We're still the part of the Commonwealth.
Can't handle his children and doesn't know how to get that thing all worked out. But yeah, we pledge allegiance to the king. But thank you very much, Daniel. This has been an awesome one. I don't know if the chat loved it because I'm not usually this legally. But I really enjoyed it because I love to have these conversations.
Yeah,
And here we
good.
go. Great
Important stuff
stream,
to have.
Jason.
Important, awkward conversations to have.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, do you think in the future, like 6 months or so, I might come back? We'll see where Maids is at that time. See if
Yeah,
anything's
I'm sure there'll
changed
be more.
since then.
Definitely be more to report on, I'm sure.
No, I love how you say report on. So you want to bring it back to the people. That's awesome. And
Exactly.
you don't have a podcast, do you?
I don't, man. I'm just on Twitter. And if people want to reach out, I don't really solicit clients. Like people reach out to me organically on Twitter if they want. I'll send people more information if they need. Just follow me on Twitter, and you can DM me there, and I'll send you info about how I work and all the details. So
Well,
that's it.
thank you
That's
very
all.
much. Yeah, and we only said Viva like 4 times. So this
That's right.
wasn't an
Viva
interview
Frei.
about Viva.
People don't even know that I'm Viva's bro. Viva Frei's
Yeah.
bro. Grifting bro.
And now we know you're the older brother. So he's number
That's
5.
right. Awesome, man. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure
thank
and
you
privilege.
very much, Daniel.
Yep.
Yeah, you take care and we'll talk offline another time. You have a good one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ciao. Bye.
Thanks. Bye. He's got to get back to billable hours. I don't blame him. He just gave me 2 hours, 15 minutes. Do you know how much money that would have cost if I had to pay for that? I'd have to fundraise. But thank you very much, Daniel. I really appreciate that. And to my chat, let me know if you enjoyed that. We were a little bit higher level than our normal conversations. We were getting into some legalese and talk about procedure and differences here and differences there and how do tickets really become enforceable and things like that. Did you enjoy that kind of conversation? Because I did. I'm a nerd, so a legal nerd even, so I enjoyed it. He didn't know about the CRT training. He may not have gotten that message yet, or he may have done it without realizing it, because it wasn't standing out as CRT. It was just take these 4 hours, you go through it, and then you recognize what it is for. So maybe he just super busy went through it, and it wasn't really hard. Yes, I'll treat people good. Yes, people have race. Yes, I understand I have a race. That was about it. But overall, yeah, I thought it was good. And then what did you think about the income-based fines instead of set fines? I've always thought that to be very unfair in the system because I always represented anybody that came to me, and there's a lot of times I didn't get paid. But I did notice that people who didn't have large bank accounts were absolutely being kind of suppressed by the system, losing their license, can't get to work, make their life more complicated, cause them, because of necessity, to go ahead and drive without insurance and things like that. So I didn't think that was fair. Other countries don't do it that way. I also wanted to talk to him a bit about how our system is responding to and reacting to and recovering from the COVID mandates that the system had. We basically had like a year or so where there was no court happening. How do people recover from that? And as we heard, some places had loans, government, bank, other places. And then some of the other people who could have just kept working. We also heard about how it's different when it's not in person anymore. It's true. It's true. Now, in some cases, it makes a lot more sense. Like I'm in Alberta dealing with some stuff in Ontario. I had to fly for one. If I have to fly again, it's an expense, and you don't always get back your costs, all that kind of stuff. But I'm seeing a lot of good responses here that you guys like that as well, and there's some nerds in the chat as well. That's awesome. Did you get a nerdgasm? That's what happens when you're nerdy and you're very happy. You get a nerdgasm, and I get those from time to time. And I really enjoyed Daniel. I only met him briefly. We had him behind the scenes for one conversation for about 30 minutes. I got to meet him briefly, but now I got to really get to know him. And he's a cool guy. He's a lot like his brother. Very willing to give up his time, have a chat, and share the knowledge and information. And I also like his advocacy work and his stance on maids. It's a tough one. It really is a tough one. Do you want people to suffer? When it's framed like that, you almost have to be callous and heartless to respond to it. But it's framed like that on a purpose because they're not addressing the real issue either. It's not about suffering. That is one piece of it. It's also about life and not losing it. So the response, do you want people to suffer? Do you like to murder people? It's not much of a conversation then. You're not going to have a lot of dialogue when you do that. But that's basically what we're talking about. But thank you all very much. I'm sure some of you had different opinions about maids, and we didn't align completely on that one. But look, this is a sensitive topic, and we're going to chat about it. And some of you had some questions about how to deal with employment after non-attesting. That's a tough one. So many people lost their jobs. So many people. and lose your job, lose your income, lose your house. Some people lost their family, wife, etc. And some people took it further and took theirs. So look, the legal system's difficult. It's not perfect. There's always room for improvement. That's kind of the good thing about the legal system is through judgment, through decisions, through case law, through motions, through actions, things do change. So it's kind of the neat thing about the legal system. There is ways to clean it up, fix it, come to better decisions, overrule, appeal. It's a neat little system when you really get into it. But it isn't for the uneducated, and it isn't for the inexperienced, and it's certainly not for the lower income. So those are problems that need to be addressed. AI might help for some of it. Class actions might help for some of it. And then just some really good lawyers who happy with their income and want to put some time towards assisting access to justice for everyone. There's a lot of ways to do it. Happy to tell you, though, I am talking to the province and some policymaker in Alberta about bringing forward the idea of paralegals in Alberta, licensed paralegals in Alberta. For all of you who are not in Ontario, you don't realize that Ontario was the first jurisdiction in North America to license paralegals, which means you have to basically pass a bar. It's just a subset of the entire available law, but it is a subset, and you are licensed. You are an officer of the court in Ontario as a paralegal. You're not an assistant like everywhere else. So when I tell people in Alberta, I'm a paralegal, they're like, that's just an assistant. That means nothing. No. I'm a licensed paralegal from Ontario. I did my schooling. I just did half of what a lawyer does. So I can't do the indictable offenses, which is like murder, but I can do the summary stuff. Anything under 6 months, $5,000, paralegals will tackle that. So I think Alberta should have them, and I think all provinces should have them. It lowers the access to justice, lowers the access to justice for people. And Alberta actually has a legal aid problem. It's very expensive, and paralegals would assist with that. So I am talking to a policy writer in the UCP to see if we can bring paralegals to Alberta. And for the rest of your provinces, I hope you pick up that torch as well. Ontario did it for a reason. Their system was about to collapse under the weight of the costs and the population. Paralegals became a good solution for them. Not perfect, but it did save the system. It didn't collapse. So, folks, thank you all very much. I really enjoyed this one. I got a little nerdy on you. Some of you liked it. Don't forget to subscribe. Go ahead and do that. Do the follows on YouTube and all that kind of stuff. Rumble, Odyssey, Twitch, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Getter. All available for you. We go live on all of those. And if you like it, clip it, because that will make darn sure that more people can find it. So did you like that part about talking about income-based? Clip it. Did you like that part where we're talking about maids? Clip it. And if you just liked hearing about Viva growing up as the younger brother of Daniel, the better-looking, more intelligent one, clip it. Don't tell Viva, though, I said that. Don't clip this then. But thank you all very much. So don't forget to join our Discord. So someone reached out to me, asked me for the link. What we're going to start doing is putting the link in the chat so it's available for you. I'll teach my chat lady how to do that and get it to you. But if you can find me on it, I'm Jason Levine MP. You can search us out there, ask for an invite. We can approve you. And if you're already on my Discord and somebody asks for it, hand it into the chat. There's a few people in the chat that have it as well. All right, folks, I'm going to wrap this up. I got another call to make before I get on with my evening with my family. And thank you all very much. I love you, and God bless.